Chapter 607. Jiang Hai won't leave this place. If he wants to leave, where can he find such a good place? The only reason he can make money is because of his ranch. If he leaves, where can he find such a good ranch? You've all been fooled by him. If he leaves, how can he make money? Winthrop is his tool to make money. He won't leave. Does Winthrop belong to him? If he wants to leave, let him go. We'll pay again and rebuild the things he built. It's not like we can't afford it. At most, we'll get a loan from the city government. We're a high-quality enterprise here. That's right. Think about it. Who's the most profitable person in Winthrop now? It's Jiang Hai. He's a businessman. A businessman is most particular about making money. Being able to make money is the most important thing. Don't you understand? The reason he doesn't let Celanese in is not because of pollution. He just wants to tie all your income to him. That way he'll be the local tyrant here. Don't you understand that? When Jiang Hai wanted to withdraw his investment, some people who had nothing to do in Winthrop began to spread another version of the story. They said that Jiang Hai was reluctant to leave because he also needed to make money. This made the townspeople who were originally nervous when they heard the news calm down a lot. Indeed, they were not stupid. They could choose not to believe those who slandered Jiang Hai. As for those who said that Jiang Hai should leave, there were not many who believed it. If Jiang Hai left, where could they find tourists from Wuxia? After all, these people were the main force here. The local tourists, whether in terms of quantity or quality, the amount of money spent, were far inferior to the tourists from Wuxia. Jiang Hai definitely could not leave. They would not let Jiang Hai leave no matter what. After living a good life for a few months, they did not want to go back to their original life. Therefore, Jiang Hai definitely could not leave. However, whether Jiang Hai really wanted to leave or was just scaring them remained to be seen. Although Winthrop was not in an uproar, most people were watching. However, they all knew one thing. Jiang Hai and Mayor Wallace were the same. They did not support the chemical factory's move. They did not feel that he was that tough. Originally, 60% of the people supported the establishment of the chemical plant. After all, no one didn't want their family to be able to generate income. Another 20% of the people didn't care. Only less than 20% of the people supported Mayor Wallace. However, after today's incident, the people who supported Jiang Hai also supported Mayor Wallace. In an instant, more than 50% of the people supported the chemical factory's move. Almost 60% of the people did not support the chemical factory's move. Because of Jiang Hai's words, the people who supported the factory's move were reduced to 40%. Less than 10% of the people did not care. For a moment, the situation on Celanese's side was not very good. However, what was surprising was that Celanese people mainly used the idle people to discredit Jiang Hai, or to say that Jiang Hai would never leave. Other than that, they did not do anything else. It was not until the afternoon that Augustine Wilson stood up. According to him, the reason he brought Celanese people over was that he had worked in the factory before. He knew that the factory met American standards and would not pollute the environment. After all, this was his home. However, he did not want any irreconcilable conflicts between Celanese and Jiang Hai. Therefore, he decided to talk to Jiang Hai personally and persuade him not to leave. He also wanted to let Celanese move in. After he stood up, a lot of people supported him and followed him to Jiang Hai's place. For a while, he became a positive figure. It's true that when the forest is big, there are all kinds of birds. He even became a leader. But unfortunately, they were given the cold shoulder because Jiang Hai wasn't in the manor today. Huang Yunfei and the others hadn't left yet. Jiang Hai naturally wanted to accompany them to play. Anyway, his attitude had already been made clear. As for whether they believe it or not, it's up to them to decide. At most, he would sell the manor and take the cows and his fish to other places, although it would be troublesome. But now, Jiang Hai had the ability to go wherever he wanted. This was his greatest ability. When these people came to visit, Jiang Hai was at Old George's horse farm, leading Fu Yuan and the others to ride horses. Originally, there were horses in Jiang Hai's manor, but after all, there were now many cows in the manor. People like Robbins Garcia had to take care of the cows. There was no one to teach Fu Yuan and the others how to ride horses. There was also no one to take care of them. Instead of causing trouble in the manor, it was better to come to Old George's horse farm to play. Looking at Jiang Hai, Old George had obviously received some news. "Jiang, you're not really leaving, are you?" Looking at Jiang Hai, who was tired from riding and resting, Old George walked over and handed over a bottle of drink. Then he said to Jiang Hai with some worry, "If the chemical plant is not built, why should I leave? I still like this place. It can be considered my home. But if that chemical plant is built, then I will have to leave." After taking a sip of the Coca-Cola that Old George handed over, Jiang Hai burped and said to old George seriously. This why? The chemical plant is not in your way. Why do you have to leave? Hearing that Jiang Hai was really leaving, old George could not help but be a little excited. After all, his horse farm originally relied on selling horses for a living. Although it was not to the extent that he could not survive, his life was not too rich. But since Jiang Hai brought the tourists from Wuxia, this was the first time he knew that he could make so much money by letting people ride horses. The money he earned in the past 2 months was more than what he earned in a year by selling horses. Now that Jiang Hai was leaving, his heart was cold. I can tell you. You also know that the cattle in my manor are very good. What? It's mainly because of the environment. My manor does not allow a little bit of pollution. If there is a little bit of pollution, the quality of the cattle in my manor will be greatly reduced. So if this chemical plant enters Winthrop, I can only leave. Looking at old George, Jiang Hai thought for a while and made up a lie. There are some things that he can't say directly. Dragon balls, scales, aura, these things they can't understand. Not to mention that he doesn't want to be cut into pieces for research. But it's a good idea to talk about cattle. This is also the explanation that he thought for a long time last night. And this explanation is also very persuasive. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, old George couldn't help but say, oh. Indeed, Jiang Hai wants to make money by relying on Winthrop, but how much money can Winthrop make for him? 18 million a year? That was all there was to it. His main source of income was still his manor and his ranch. If Jiang Hai's soaring dragon manor is destroyed because of the chemical plant, then Jiang Hai's gains really don't make up for the losses. When Jiang Hai said this, old George also believed it. This explanation is indeed reasonable. But what chemical plant? Didn't they say that they won't pollute the environment? At this time, old George's heart was already biased. For him, Jiang Hai's existence is very important. If the contradiction between Jiang Hai and that chemical plant is irreconcilable, then he will definitely stand by Jiang Hai's side. This can be seen from his new title. There is a chemical plant that won't pollute the environment? Whether you believe it or not, I don't believe it. Shrugging, Jiang Hai said calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, old George, who has experienced the United States Civil War, couldn't help but laugh. He remembered the lies that the American government had told him when he was very young in order to develop the country. Chemical plants won't pollute, mines won't pollute, the West is full of gold. For these American civilians, the credibility of the United States government is just that. In this way, another person joined Jiang Hai's camp. But they didn't notice that at this time, in a corner in the distance, a white man also heard Jiang Hai's words. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, he frowned, then walked to the corner and took out his mobile phone. Not long after, Peter, who was still examining Winthrop, received a call from above. After learning that the news released by Jiang Hai was true, his eyes narrowed. It seems that between him and Jiang Hai, one of them must retreat in order to settle this matter. But thinking about it, he was still a little excited. If things went too smoothly, how could he be praised? Recently, he heard that the company's board of directors' dissatisfaction with the current general manager was about to reach the limit. If he performed well at this time, would he have the opportunity to compete for the position of being second only to one person? Thinking of this, Peter's eyes also lit up. In order to step on Jiang Hai, it seems that the debate has to continue. Isn't Jiang Hai going to leave? That's good, I'll let you go when the time comes. Thinking of this, he took out his mobile phone and sent a text message to Jiang Hai Wilson. Sometimes, it was so easy to plot against an unsuspecting person. And most importantly, he didn't think that Jiang Hai could win against him. Just as Jiang Hai returned to the manor, a new wave of debate came again, and this time, it was much fiercer than in the morning. There were even many radical people who directly shouted for Jiang Hai to get out of Winthrop. Although this kind of person was suppressed by Mayor Wallace and the police station's Morris Smith in the first place, it was not a big deal. But after all, Winthrop was a town with a population of more than 1,000 that could be found on a map. These jobless, idle people and racists were everywhere. Usually they didn't go against Jiang Hai because there were no benefits. Now that there were benefits, they even dared to provoke the President of the United States. Chapter 608. Are you really okay? Why don't you come back to China with us first? Standing outside the airport, Su Wei couldn't help but worry about Jiang Hai. Indeed, in his opinion, Jiang Hai's situation is really not very good. Don't worry, this is my home. Will I have any problems? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled and said indifferently, You are so stubborn. Well, do as you see fit. Looking at Jiang Hai's indifferent look, the three people here couldn't help but sigh. Even Huang Yunfei's wife, LV Jiao, was much quieter at this time. In the days they stayed here, they watched Jiang Hai's words slowly change. From the first day they came, Jiang Hai was almost the most dazzling star in this town. Today, when Jiang Hai drove them to the airport, the people on the road would subconsciously avoid Jiang Hai. It was impossible for them to directly clash with Jiang Hai because Jiang Hai was not a saint or a person who only chased after the leader of the evil. If you dare to provoke him, you will be skinned alive. This is Jiang Hai's style. So although they were alienated, no one dared to come here to provoke him. At most, they just stayed away from him. Well, get on the plane. Send me a WeChat message when you get home. This time you came to play, I didn't expect to encounter such a thing. It's really bad luck. Come again when you have time. I will treat you well. Looking at the slightly tangled look of several people, Jiang Hai patted them on the shoulder and said goodbye to them one by one. Isn't it enough to carry it out properly this time? My circle of friends is about to explode. Every day, abalone, lobster, sea cucumber, beef, those food, to be honest, I guess I will think about it for a long time when I go back. And these things I bought, buddy, they are all great. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Huang Yunfei couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. To be honest, he was very satisfied with this honeymoon trip. In fact, not only him but his wife was also very satisfied. Although she had not seen too many famous historical sites, there were not many women who were interested in those things. She cared more about going shopping and eating these delicacies. To be honest, in her opinion, Jiang Hai's place was really too perfect, if not for those trivial matters. Alright, hurry up and go through the security check. I'll look for you guys when I go back during the new year. Looking at the reluctant look on everyone's faces, Jiang Hai smiled and urged them to hurry up and board the plane. These people were also very reluctant to leave Jiang Hai's place. Of course, it was also possible that they were reluctant to leave Jiang Hai's food. They helplessly waved their hands and walked through the security check. Of course, they had a lot of luggage, but they had already handled the transportation. This time, when they came to Jiang Hai's place to play, each of them brought back a lot of things such as maple syrup, American ginseng, all kinds of clothes, shoes, trinkets, and so on. They bought a lot. Let's go, we should go back too. Seeing these people walking through the security check, Jiang Hai also said to the people behind him. At this time, it seemed that there was no one behind him. If someone heard Jiang Hai's words, they would probably suspect that he was sick or saw something that he shouldn't have seen. But Jiang Hai didn't care. When he turned his head, a woman wearing a baseball cap appeared on his side, carrying a box in her hand, wearing a pair of huge sunglasses, chewing gum. Looking at Jiang Hai walking over, she couldn't help but twitch her mouth slightly. How did you know I was here? Looking at Jiang Hai, the beauty took off her huge sunglasses, revealing a rather delicate face. Jiang Hai was very familiar with the owner of this face, Azalina Vicabrio. The glasses were given to Delina by Prawalton. The top is Bernice's, the bottom is Paige's, the earrings are Ohilia's, the shoes are Janice, and that bag is mine. Looking at Azalina, Jiang Hai said calmly. I didn't expect your memory to be so good. Young man, do you want to learn how to cook from me? Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina smiled and approached him, then took the initiative to hold Jiang Hai's arm, but her words only got a supercilious look from Jiang Hai. Since the night Jiang Hai came back, in fact, Jiang Hai found that Azalina's situation was not right. He didn't see her that night. After learning that she was not feeling well, he went to see her the next day, only to find that she was not in the period when relatives came to visit her. Then she told Jiang Hai that in fact, these days, someone had been observing Jiang Hai's manner. And she was secretly watching that person to see what was going on with him. After learning this, Jiang Hai didn't care about her. Jiang Hai knew that if he went out today, Azalina would definitely follow him quietly. This was also Jiang Hai's confidence. Just now, when he saw a familiar figure, Jiang Hai knew that it must be her. How's the situation recently? Walking out of the airport with Azalina, Jiang Hai asked as they walked towards the parking lot. They haven't done anything recently, but they are still looking for people to slander you. But boss, when did you become so timid? Could it be that what they said was true? So that you can't refute it? Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina asked curiously. These days, Celanese company had not been idle. Every day they sent people to talk bad about Jiang Hai in town. Sometimes, a lie would be true if it was told 100 times. In recent days they had been slandering Jiang Hai more than 100 times. It was precisely because of this that Jiang Hai's reputation in Winthrop was also badly damaged, very badly. But Jiang Hai acted as if he didn't know. He did what he was supposed to do and would not be hurt by these rumors. Seeing Jiang Hai's fearless look, the other party was even happier to slander him. When the people in the town saw that Jiang Hai had not come out to explain, they thought that the rumors were true. Therefore they became more biased and were more careful with Jiang Hai. It had to be said that sometimes, people thought too much. Okay, my friends are gone. I should fight back. Otherwise these guys will really think that I'm easy to bully. Touching Azalina's hair, Jiang Hai narrowed his eyes. He didn't care what these people said, but he was not someone to be trifled with. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, Azalina also smiled. The Jiang Hai she knew was like this. He would not be scared. Mayor Wallace, is it? Can you call for a town meeting tonight? I have something to say. When the two walked to the parking lot, Jiang Hai got in his shield and directly called Wallace. As for how to inform these people, Jiang Hai did not care. Anyway, he was going to directly kill those people tonight. There was no problem with a debate, but sometimes they would think too much and they felt that Jiang Hai was also thinking too much. At night? I believe you. Hearing that Jiang Hai wanted to gather the townspeople together, Mayor Wallace was stunned for a moment. Such a gathering was rare. Basically, these grand gatherings were only held during the election year or during the annual Poseidon festival. Usually they would not be held, but since Jiang Hai said that he wanted to gather, then he would hold one. Boss, what are you going to say tonight? Watching Jiang Hai hang up the phone, Azalina could not help but ask hesitantly. You will know tonight. Hearing Azalina's words, Jiang Hai smiled softly. Driving his car, Jiang Hai returned to Winthrop's home. In front of the gate of his manor, he looked at the azure dragon relief above the gate. This gate was specially made when he changed the name of the Soaring Dragon Manor. It should have been about a year ago. Jiang Hai looked at the azure dragon relief on the gate. Let's go, you don't have to follow me tonight. You must protect everyone here. After driving the car into the gate, Jiang Hai said to Azalina beside him. He felt that after he finished speaking tonight, things would not be so easy to solve. In fact, Jiang Hai was now forcing these townspeople to choose which side they would give up. It was that simple. Sometimes, if the tree was not fixed, the people would not be fixed. If these people were not treated too well, it was necessary to give them a warning. But what about you? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina asked with a worried look. Me? I'll take Conrad with me. Hearing Azalina's words, Jiang Hai smiled. He now had more than one bodyguard. And most importantly, Conrad looked more intimidating than Azalina. Jiang Hai did not feed him for free. At the critical moment he had to be useful to Jiang Hai. After returning to the manor, Jiang Hai called back all the people, including those middle-aged women who were still taking care of business in the villa area. Everyone was holed up in the manor. No one was allowed to go out and of course no one was allowed to come in. At about 5 o'clock in the evening, Mayor Wallace called Jiang Hai and informed him that everyone had been informed. Of course, it was impossible for everyone to come. Basically, only one person from each family would come. After all, this was not the sea god ritual and it was not a game. Something had really happened, so it was enough for the people in charge to come. But even so, it was estimated that there would be more than 200 people attending the party tonight. The time was supposed to be 6:30, but Jiang Hai had just left at that time. Before leaving, he had repeatedly told everyone not to leave the manor today, no matter what they heard. The men were to listen to Belle's command, and the women were to listen to Azalina's command. After everything was confirmed, Jiang Hai drove his battle shield and set off with Kners and Peters. Looking at the backs of Jiang Hai and Conrad, Bernice and the others felt a little worried, but Conrad was very excited at this time. The car soon drove out of the manor. Jiang Hai also called the town's police station and specially arranged for 2 patrol cars to stop at the gate of Jiang Hai's manor. This way at least a lot of small troubles could be deterred. After resolving the situation in the manor, Jiang Hai drove directly to the town square. Chapter 609. Mayor, it's not that we want to say anything, but do you think this Jiang Hai has any sincerity? He said he wanted us to come over and we came over, but he didn't. Is he playing with us? Mayor Wallace, I respect your character, but are you really not going to say anything now? The car drove into the town of Winthrop. From far away, Jiang Hai could hear the voices coming from the square. Originally, Jiang Hai came late, so it was inevitable that he would encounter some criticism, but it was obvious that some people were guiding the public's consciousness. Listening to these voices, Jiang Hai chuckled. The United States is a bit annoying. The people are too easy to take advantage of, just like the netizens of Wuxia. Generally, after something is posted on the internet, there will always be some violent comments, but there are almost no people who really know what happened. Those who manipulated this are the legendary Internet Water Army. However, those on the internet are called Internet Water Army, and in reality they are called advocates. Jiang Hai will not let them go easily. As Jiang Hai's battle shield drove into the town, many people saw Jiang Hai's car. Jiang Hai is here. After someone in the crowd shouted, many people looked at Jiang Hai. After parking the car in the parking lot next to them, Jiang Hai and Knerson Peters got out of the car and went straight to the rostrum. Looking at Jiang Hai and Knerson Peters, many people took the initiative to make way for them, including those who were mixed in the crowd and guiding the public's consciousness. Sorry, I'm a little late. Walking to the rostrum, Jiang Hai looked at Mayor Wallace and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter as long as you are here." Seeing Jiang Hai come up, Mayor Wallace also breathed a sigh of relief and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Sitting next to him, Sh20 Clive looked at Jiang Hai with a hesitant look. "Hey you, did you say the meeting was at 6:30? Don't you have a watch? Don't you have a sense of time? Look at what time it is." After Jiang Hai and Mayor Wallace greeted, a burly man came forward from the crowd and shouted at Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai turned his head calmly and looked at him. "Who are you?" Looking at Jiang Hai's contemptuous eyes, the man was instantly speechless. It turned out that Jiang Hai didn't care what he was saying at all, and he didn't know him. In an instant he felt that his face was slapped and it was burning. "Remember, my name is Calloway Rush, you bastard." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the burly man couldn't help but shout. "Oh, if you want to go to the toilet, go over there, there is a public toilet there." Looking at this man, Jiang Hai said calmly, "You bastard." Seeing Jiang Hai's indifference to him, he couldn't help but feel even more embarrassed. This guy is Winthrop, a loafer who thinks he is a gangster and cares about his face. But now that Jiang Hai didn't give him any face, he couldn't help but take a step forward. Looking at his action, Knerson Peters also took a step forward. He likes to fight the most. Looking at Knerson Peters' action, several people in the crowd moved. If there is a conflict between Calloway and Knerson Peters, they will rush up and tell Jiang Hai and this big white man that Winthrop is theirs. Of course, if they can directly beat Jiang Hai, that would be the best ending. "Wait a minute, Calloway, we are not here to create conflicts, we are here to solve conflicts." "Jiang Hai, hello, I guess you still remember me, my name is Augustine Wilson." Seeing that a conflict was about to break out, a young white man stood up, stopped Calloway Rush's action, walked to the front of the crowd and looked at Jiang Hai and said, "Oh, I don't remember." Glancing at him, Jiang Hai still said calmly, If you don't remember, then don't remember. After all, I'm just an insignificant person, but today we want to talk to you about Winthrop." Looking at Jiang Hai, Augustine Wilson said calmly. In his view, beating Jiang Hai up is meaningless because they can't kill Jiang Hai openly. What they want is for Jiang Hai to compromise and let Jiang Hai accept the chemical factory to move into the town. Silent violence is okay, but violence is not. Moreover, he doesn't think that Jiang Hai's bodyguards will not be armed. If there is a conflict, he will be in trouble. "Jiang Hai, I don't understand why you must stop the chemical factory from moving into the town. Don't you know that this is a good way to increase the town's tax and residents' income?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Augustine shouted excitedly. "Augustine, this is a cold-blooded guy. He doesn't care about the life and death of the town's residents. What he wants is for the town's residents to continue to be poor so that he can better control the town's residents." Looking at Augustine's expression, Calloway Rush next to him continued to speak excitedly. "What a cruel guy. He only has himself in his heart. He is such a selfish guy." At this time, a third voice emerged from the crowd. "Look at the townspeople around you. What a simple townspeople. Don't you feel guilty for scheming against them? Are you still complacent? You control the economy of this town, you control the tourism of this town, you control everything in this town. You can do whatever you want here and ride on the heads of all the townspeople. Winthrop belongs to the people of Winthrop. You, an outsider, are not allowed to tell us what to do here." With a third voice there would be a fourth and a fifth. One voice after another emerged. Looking at these people, Jiang Hai did not do anything. He just looked at the people below calmly. Under the guidance of these people, most of the people began to whisper to each other. Now they were starting to waver. Originally, they thought that Jiang Hai was going to say something or make concessions. But now it seems like that wasn't the case. "Yeah, why don't you let the chemical factory enter? This is a good way to increase income. You can't prohibit us from making money just because the chemical factory will pollute your manor. We also need to make a living." Finally, a young man was persuaded by these people and joined the ranks of these people. He looked at Jiang Hai on the stage and said loudly, "Oh, he took the bait." Listening to this voice, Augustine lowered his head and couldn't help but show a smile. This is what he wants. There is no point in just instigators like them. They want to make Jiang Hai fall into the sea of people's war. Did you hear that? Jiang Hai? It's not that we are against you, but you can't let the town fall into a situation where there is no money to make because of your own reasons. Today it's the chemical factory, you don't let us build it. Tomorrow there will be other factories, you won't let us build it. You are cutting off our way to make money. I remember there is a saying in Wuxia that cutting off people's way to make money is like killing their parents. You are really too cruel to do this. Looking at Jiang Hai, Augustine stood up and shouted at Jiang Hai with a face full of excitement. People like you can't represent Winthrop and you can't block the way of the townspeople. Jiang Hai, you should get out of the way. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was still very calm, Augustine shouted loudly. Get out of the way. 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 With Augustine's words, the punks below also began to quarrel loudly. Hearing their words, many townspeople also joined in, and for a time the square was filled with shouts. But among these people, there were many who stood firmly by Jiang Hai's side. Looking at these people, Jiang Hai smiled. It seemed that he was not the enemy of everyone. In fact, even if he was the enemy of everyone, he didn't care, not to mention that he wasn't. Hey, it seems to be working well. At this time in a nearby block, the people of Celanese were gathered there. Looking at the square in the distance and listening to the deafening sound, Peter couldn't help but chuckle. He really didn't expect it to be so effective. He originally thought that Jiang Hai's reputation here was very stable, but now it seemed that it was just SOSO. The voices are getting louder and louder. Jiang Hai's self-confidence has been shattered. This damn guy, he shouldn't be able to stop us this time. Hearing the words of the boss next to him, another person of Celanese couldn't help but whisper. The employees of Celanese behind them looked at this person with a trace of worship in their eyes. They really didn't think that this matter could be solved so easily. They could only say that their boss was indeed their boss. Looking at Jiang Hai standing on the high platform in the distance, Peter said proudly, "Next we will force the old mayor to vote. Celanese's entry into Winthrop is in the bag." After solving the biggest problem, Jiang Hai, the rest were just small problems. Originally he thought that Jiang Hai would be an opponent, but now it seemed that he was just SOSO. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was standing motionless in the same place, Peter had a smug look on his face. The biggest rock had been moved by him. Jiang Hai, there is no doubt that you have saved this town, but the reactions around you are the cruel reality. You are very powerful, you are the most powerful person I have ever seen. You must have a way. Looking at the waves of voices below, each louder than the last, Shenty Clive couldn't help but whisper in her heart as she looked at Jiang Hai straight back. At this time her eyes were full of anxiety. The things between her and Jiang Hai were indeed not easy to talk about, but her heart had always been with Jiang Hai. Looking at Jiang Hai standing there suffering, she even wanted to replace him. You guys are really noisy. Just when Shenty Clive was helpless, Jiang Hai's voice came over. Chapter 610. You're all really noisy. Although Jiang Hai's voice was not loud, it clearly entered the ears of everyone present. This made the originally loud noise almost stop in an instant. Everyone saw Jiang Hai move for the first time on the stage. He picked his ear and then flicked it gently. Look, you've shaken out my earwax. Your decibel is already a little disturbing. Looking at Jiang Hai's understatement, many people looked at each other. There was clearly some confusion in their eyes. What did Jiang Hai mean? For a moment, those people's eyes were focused on Augustine Wilson because he was the one who took the lead. Jiang Hai, what do you mean by this? Are you looking down on the people of our town? Today you must make a concession. Looking at Jiang Hai's calm look, Augustine was a little scared. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to stand up and said to Jiang Hai. It seemed that he still remembered his task. He was really a good employee. Oh, concession? Why should I give in? Looking at Augustine, Jiang Hai continued to say calmly. This is for the development of the town, so you must give in. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Augustine continued. Sorry, maybe you've got a problem wrong. Looking at the crowd in front of him, Jiang Hai directly took a chair and sat down in front of everyone in the town. Then he continued to look at the people in front of him with an unhappy face. This guy is right about something. Whether you want to admit it or not, the economy of this town is controlled by me. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the people in the town below suddenly burst into an uproar. Jiang Hai dared to say this. Even the people in the town hall behind Jiang Hai were a little surprised. Didn't Jiang Hai take the initiative to push himself to the opposite side of the townspeople? What did Jiang Hai mean by this? However, Jiang Hai didn't care about them and continued. Firstly, I'm not here to negotiate with you. Secondly, I'm not here to negotiate with you. You've got your priorities wrong. Now, Winthrop's biggest industry is tourism. But without me there won't be tourism. Hearing Jiang Hai's tough words, all the people present exchanged glances with each other. Jiang Hai's words were like a bucket of ice water, which poured over them in an instant. They wanted Jiang Hai to make concessions so that the town could have tourism and also allow the factory to enter. But Jiang Hai's words made the town's residents dumbfounded. Yes, without Jiang Hai, where would the tourism industry come from? Jiang Hai didn't just control the villas in the town, the shops, and the shooting range. He also controlled the flow of customers. The town's main tax revenue comes from my soaring dragon manor. I think there's no need for me to explain what this means. Yes, I'm in control of the town. Why aren't you trying to curry favor with me? You're still talking nonsense with me. I think you want to go back to the past. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai lifted his leg and said to them disdainfully. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, many people's hearts skipped a beat. Their gazes towards Jiang Hai also became much clearer. Winthrop belongs to Winthrop people. It's not something you can order around. Seeing Jiang Hai suppressing the whole town by himself, Augustine Wilson also became anxious. He couldn't help but step forward and shouted, Jiang Hai. Whatever you say. I'm not a Winthrop. Whatever you say. Even if you treat me as a Winthrop, I'm still the richest man here. Everything here is given to you by me. Remember, it's given to you by me. We're not in an equal partnership. These things are mine. I can give them to you or not. If I want the tourism industry here to fail, then the tourism industry will fail. If I want the ranch to move away, then I can move the ranch away. It's that simple. Pointing at the people below, Jiang Hai said word by word. This feeling of being a villain really made Jiang Hai feel good to the bone. The townsfolk below were like the suppressed laboring masses. They listened to Jiang Hai's words and couldn't say a word. Although they wanted to refute, they knew that Jiang Hai's words were true. You'll leave Winthrop? Don't be kidding. Do you think we don't know how much money you can make here in a year? Are you willing to do that? You're giving up the interests of the people for your own benefit. You're a dictator. Looking at Jiang Hai, Augustine Wilson was still making his final struggle. However, when he looked at Jiang Hai's gaze was like looking at an idiot. The manor is mine, the route is mine, and the tourists are mine. You're talking about dictatorship here? Well, this is dictatorship. If you're not satisfied, you can stand up. Toth, there's no need to hide. I saw you. You were shouting very loudly just now. Well, I'll fulfill your wish. I'll take back your shop. I'll give you 1 day to move your things. The day after tomorrow, I want to see it empty on the commercial street. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, a middle-aged man in the crowd suddenly sat down on the ground. He looked at the people around him with a face full of horror. The people around him unconsciously stood aside, as if they wanted to draw a clear line between them and him. His shop was a very conspicuous one on the commercial street. Its daily turnover was about $1,000. Jiang Hai only charged him $3,000 a month to rent his shop, which was $100 a day. This price was really not expensive. It was also because the townsfolk didn't know if these shops could make money, so Jiang Hai's price was relatively low. After deducting the shop rent, utilities, and so on, he could make a net profit of $900 a day, which was close to $30,000 a month. In the past 2 months he had made $60,000 to $70,000, but Jiang Hai took it back just like that. He was completely stunned. Originally he thought that he could fish in this muddy water, but who would have thought that Jiang Hai did not follow the rules at all? You can't do this. You're depriving Winthrop people of their right to love freedom. Seeing Jiang Hai's iron-blooded suppression, Augustine completely panicked. He said that Jiang Hai was a dictator, that Jiang Hai was only interested in profits, and that Jiang Hai was controlling the town. Jiang Hai actually admitted all these points of attack. And most importantly, after Jiang Hai admitted it, he directly fought back. This is how I am. If you don't agree with me, you can say it. The problem now was that everyone was convinced. So now he could only use human rights and freedom in the United States to speak, but his words were already quite weak. If you want human rights and freedom, it's up to you. But if you want to maintain the current situation, then I will never allow any factory to enter the town. Winthrop is yours. Mayor Wallace can vote at any time. You can recruit as many factories as you want. If there are factories here, then I will withdraw. I can use 1 month to create a Winthrop, and I can use another month to create any Winthrop. It's not that I can't live without you. I have money. The taxes I have to pay next year are as high as $600 million. I can do whatever I want in the United States. But if you don't have me... Jiang Hai did not finish his words. He just looked at the people in front of him calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, many townspeople who supported him gave him a thumbs up. They had already thought about this problem, which was why they firmly supported Jiang Hai. These people thought too much. They thought that as long as 1,000 ants were tied together, they could negotiate with humans. They had never thought that the two sides were not equal at all. The townspeople who had been shouting loudly lowered their heads under Jiang Hai's gaze. They were not ashamed. They were really afraid that Jiang Hai would see them. Nowadays, the townspeople were more or less involved in the tourism industry. They did not want to lose their good jobs like Toth. They believed that as long as Jiang Hai said something, their hotels would be empty forever, their cruise ships would never receive tourists in the morning, their small shops would be driven out of the business district, and their restaurants would be completely deserted. Yes, Jiang Hai was controlling the economy here. They were not people who liked to wait. As long as Jiang Hai wanted, he could make Winthrop go back to its pre-liberation state overnight. After Jiang Hai broke the window paper mercilessly, the Americans behaved themselves. No one would go against money, not to mention that Jiang Hai had never done anything that would incur the wrath of the heavens. He had never bullied a man, nor did he dominate a woman. He was always polite to everyone, but sometimes this politeness would be used as a tool to attack others. You're threatening the townspeople. Everyone, don't be deceived by his flowery words. This is a hegemony, this is a dictatorship. Seeing that the townspeople had completely fallen silent, Augustine couldn't help but shout to the people around him. However, the townspeople who were very enthusiastic just now were now only those hoodlums. All the decent townspeople were now well behaved. Seeing that no one supported them, Augustine and the others were really flustered this time. They just looked at Jiang Hai on the high platform. Jiang Hai had a mocking smile on his face. He was mocking them literally. I'm a narrow-minded person. Today's matter, I hope it's the first and last time. I'm here to make it clear that if Winthrop enters any factory, I will withdraw from here. Of course, if there is no factory, then I will help develop the tourist attractions here. I've tentatively decided to build a water park here after March next year. The specific situation will be discussed at that time. Seeing that the townspeople were well behaved, Jiang Hai didn't pressure them blindly. It's a good strategy to give them a carrot after giving them a stick. Jiang Hai has a lot of money now, and he will have more money after he collects the fish next year. The money is in the bank. In addition to paying taxes to the American government, he also has to find some ways to spend the money. Damn it. Seeing that Jiang Hai ruined the plan that they had prepared for so many days with just a few words, Augustine was not reconciled. He was really not reconciled, but his words attracted Jiang Hai's attention. By the way, I said I'm a narrow-minded person. I don't want any shops to entertain these guys. Otherwise they're going against me. Thank you. Pointing to Augustine and the others, Jiang Hai said word by word. Chapter 6:11. You bastard, I'll kill you. Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, the hooligans' minds buzzed. Now, no one doubted the strength of Jiang Hai's words. If Jiang Hai said in front of everyone that they couldn't buy anything, then they really couldn't buy anything. Especially at this time, the only thing they could do was to leave Winthrop, and that was all. Jiang Hai was going to kill them all. Immediately, many people went crazy. They screamed and pounced on Jiang Hai, who was on the high platform. Connerson Peters, who had been standing behind Jiang Hai, grinned. He had been waiting for this scene all night. Looking at the few people who pounced on him, Connerson screamed and pounced on them. He punched the biggest guy who had been shouting the loudest and sent him flying. His face was deformed in an instant, and he even lost a few teeth. He lay on the ground, unable to move. Seeing that Connerson had actually attacked, the other hooligans did not hold back either. They screamed and pounced on him. Unfortunately, how could they be a match for Connerson? What's more, now that the townspeople had calmed down, they definitely wouldn't provoke Jiang Hai because of them. The women immediately retreated, and so did the old man. However, the brawny men didn't care about the fact that they were from the same town. They went up and caught a lot of people. Only 2 or 3 people ran to Connerson. Connerson wasn't polite to these people who came from 1,000 miles away to deliver their heads to him. He punched each of them until they couldn't stand up anymore. Although these hooligans were usually good at fighting, they were far inferior to Connerson, a black boxing master, when it came to fighting strength. They couldn't get up in an instant as they lay on the ground. Take these troublemakers away. At this moment, Sheriff Maris Smith, who had been sitting behind Jiang Hai, also stood up and shouted. The police who had been maintaining order here rushed over and took away these troublemakers. They had always been standing firmly behind Jiang Hai. You are helping the tyrant. You will not have a good ending. Jiang Hai is a dictatorial bastard. He controls the town's economy. Sooner or later you will regret it. The townspeople will not be your slaves. Looking at Augustine Wilson, who was still shouting loudly after being taken away, Jiang Hai could not help but twitch his mouth. The reason why he was not worried when all kinds of news spread in the town was because he had enough trump cards. The relationship between him and the town was not an equal cooperation, although it was a win-win situation. He could make the town prosperous, but he could also destroy the town directly. This was Jiang Hai's ability. As long as he showed his attitude, these rioters in the town would be stunned. Because no matter how stupid they were, they knew that they could not let Jiang Hai go. As for occupying Jiang Hai's manor, this was the United States. Everything had to follow the law. Even if Jiang Hai's manor was deserted, it was not something they could occupy. They could steal fish from Jiang Hai's manor. Jiang Hai could shoot directly. Would they dare to occupy Jiang Hai's manor? Then they would not be forcing Jiang Hai to give in. They would be rebelling. The police in the United States would certainly not allow them to do so. If they did, who would come to the United States to invest? Therefore, after making it clear as long as they were not crazy, they would not go against Jiang Hai. And these people did not break the law. It was freedom of speech. Inciting the crowd to resist Jiang Hai was not illegal. But Jiang Hai did not let others sell their things, so it was not illegal. Their only choice was to leave Winthrop. As for whether they had a job or not, what did it have to do with Jiang Hai? They could do whatever they wanted. Okay, I'll leave the rest to you. Mayor Wallace, Sheriff Murray, I'll go back first. Seeing that the rioters had been arrested, Jiang Hai smiled. Fight with him? These little tricks were useless. Just like what Jiang Hai said, although sometimes he would lose his mind, especially when facing certain women. But most of the time he was still very tough. He was not a saint, nor did he have a saint's disease. He did not spend money to find people to oppose him. He knew that today's incident was caused by Celanese people, but this was not a reason for these people to oppose him. The law did not apply to the masses. This sentence did not exist in Jiang Hai's dictionary. He remembered these people who opposed him today. If there were any good things in the future, it would naturally have nothing to do with them. After turning his head and saying something to Mayor Wallace and Sheriff Murray, Jiang Hai returned to his car with Knerson Peters, who still wanted to continue. He started the engine and drove to his manor under the gaze of these people. Looking at the disappearing taillights of Jiang Hai's car, the people in the square fell into silence again. Ahem, I told you not to try to fight with Jiang Hai because you really can't win against him. But you didn't believe me at that time, and now. Forget it, let's disperse. The town is still the town and we are still us. We are all villagers, so I won't say any harsh words. George, I'll let you use Toth's shop as a bar, what do you think? Looking at the quiet crowd, Mayor Wallace said calmly. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, everyone looked at each other and old George smiled and nodded. He had always wanted to set up a bar in the commercial street, but he was too late. A big enough shop had already been rented out, so he had not been able to get one. But now it was different. Toth dug his own grave and Jiang Hai rented the shop to him. What could be more wonderful than this? It seemed that he was on the right side to support Jiang Hai. The other people who supported Jiang Hai were also happy. It was time to divide the peaches. If old George could get one, how could they not? Thinking of this, they couldn't help but laugh. Those who originally opposed Jiang Hai were like defeated roosters at this time. They were far from being able to threaten Jiang Hai. Now the only thing they wanted was to keep their current positions. As for Celanese, who would care about him? This Jiang Hai is really interesting. Sandy, are you really not going to consider being with him? Having such a boyfriend is really something to be proud of. Looking at the gradually dispersing crowd, Mayor Wallace had a smile on his face for the first time these days. Although Jiang Hai's handling of this matter was somewhat violent, the matter had finally been suppressed. Moreover, it had also set a tone for the town. It was estimated that no one would want to bring in a factory in the future. Of course, if the tourism industry couldn't continue, then that would be a different story. When the dust had settled, he looked at Sandy Clive and said to her with a smile, "Don't worry, Sandy Clive. If he didn't have so many women around him, maybe I would have been the mistress of the Soaring Dragon Manor. Moreover, he has a wife in Wuxia." Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Shenty Clive, who used to have some relationship with Jiang Hai, smiled and said helplessly, "Indeed, sometimes things were not as simple as people thought. Sometimes people always have to understand some trade-offs. The world of the rich is destined to be different from ours. Because they have fewer requirements for laws and standards of living, they can live more freely. I think you know what I'm saying." Hearing Shenty Clive's words, Mayor Wallace smiled and shook his head. Some words didn't need to be said too clearly. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Shtwani Clive also bit her lips. She was still thinking about this. This Jiang Hai is really a character. Just when all the dust in the square had settled, in a room in another block in the distance, Peter and a group of people also quieted down. Originally they thought that they had succeeded. They almost opened champagne to celebrate, but they did not expect that Jiang Hai would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Putting down the cigarette in his hand, Peter looked at the town square in the distance and couldn't help but frown. Things were really troublesome. Peter, now the language debate is useless. What should we do next? Looking at Peter standing here, the people next to him whispered. This Jiang Hai is really tricky. Originally they thought that this time they were sure to win, but they did not expect that Jiang Hai would go up and scold them, shocking all the townspeople. Under Jiang Hai's abuse of power, they chose to give up the chemical plant and become cowards. These people were really despicable. But there was no other way. Even if they wanted to bite Jiang Hai to death, things had already happened. They had to find a way. Now, if they wanted to complete the company's task, it was estimated that it would be useless to mess with Jiang Hai. We can't do it openly, but we can still play some tricks. We can't bribe Jiang Hai, but we can bribe the people here. Although it's a bit troublesome, I want Winthrop to hold a referendum on our promotion. After thinking for a while, Peter said faintly. Since the strategy didn't work, then brute force was the only way. Although it would cost more money and time, they had to build the chemical plant in Celanese, and the place to build it could only be Winthrop. As for the official situation, they would naturally solve it. As for the problem of public opinion, they would also find a way. Hearing Peter's words, everyone present looked at each other. Although they were a little curious about what Peter would do, they chose to obey because they also knew. If the plant in Winthrop wasn't built this time, then they wouldn't have a good time when they went back. We understand. After looking at each other, everyone in Celanese nodded. Jiang Hai, the game has just begun. Hearing the words of the people behind him, Peter also said with a smile. Chapter 6:12. Jiang Hai, has the matter been resolved? After the war shield returned to the manor, Jiang Hai and Conrad also got out of the car. After watching Conrad happily return, Jiang Hai also returned to the villa. As soon as he returned, Bernice anxiously asked Jiang Hai. Yeah, it's all resolved. Looking at Bernice, Littleya, Delina, Marion, Azalina, and Aphrodite, who were gathered in the living room of his villa, Jiang Hai's face showed a smile for the first time today. Then he lay down on the sofa with a slightly tired expression. Looking at Jiang Hai's movements and listening to Jiang Hai's words, the women breathed a sigh of relief. Then they immediately surrounded him and asked about what happened tonight. Jiang Hai also gave them a simple explanation. When they heard that Jiang Hai went up and scolded them, these women couldn't help but laugh. This was Jiang Hai. If it was another person, they wouldn't be so energetic. Indeed, this matter was because of Jiang Hai. As the old saying goes, if you don't do anything wrong during the day, you won't be afraid of ghosts at night. And as the old saying goes, if you have no desires, you will be strong. Jiang Hai's secret was his Dragon Balls. It wasn't really because of the good environment here that he could raise such a good cow. Jiang Hai's biggest reliance was himself. Therefore, he could create all kinds of soaring dragon manners anytime and anywhere. As long as he wanted, he could build as many as he wanted. Moreover, he didn't evade taxes, nor did he break the law. Even if someone wanted to mess with him, did they think that the 2 billion oil futures that he prepared was a joke? As long as he took out the 2 billion, the people in the world who wanted to protect him could line up from his home to the imperial capital. No one would care about a manor lord with a net worth of more than 100 million, but no one wouldn't care about a manor lord with a net worth of more than 100 million. This was the problem of natural wealth. Jiang Hai had the strength to do this. Since Jiang Hai was not afraid of official matters, what was there to be afraid of? As for what was said later, it was even more so. Between Jiang Hai and Winthrop, Jiang Hai didn't need to rely on Winthrop for anything. The cooperation between the two was led by Jiang Hai. He was doing this to make money. If Winthrop made him unhappy, then he would create another Winthrop. He was someone who wanted to make money and be happy at the same time. Well, since the matter is settled, let's go take a bath and sleep. Hearing Jiang Hai's simple explanation, Bernice also smiled. She felt that she really didn't have anything to do recently. Her heart seemed to be tied to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai always said that he was a salted fish, but Bernice felt that she was about to become a salted fish. In the past, she had focused on studying medicine in order to cure her sister. But now, her sister had been cured by Jiang Hai. There was no point for her to study medicine anymore. After all, she didn't lack money. Staying with Jiang Hai all day seemed to make her lazier. But she enjoyed this kind of life. In fact, to be honest, not everyone was a workaholic. At least Jiang Hai wasn't. Let's go. Hearing Bernice say that she wanted to take a bath, Jiang Hai didn't say much. He waved his hand and everyone went to the hot spring together. But was what Bernice said true? Jiang Hai didn't think so. Would those guys give up so easily? Walking out of the villa, Jiang Hai glanced at Dai, who was not sitting on Goldie's head, and Chirp, who had just returned and was lying in his nest. Sometimes animals were more useful than people, such as when monitoring. After taking a shower, nothing happened. However, when Jiang Hai returned to his room, Janice and Bridget had already sneaked in. Needless to say, what happened next was inevitable. Jiang Hai didn't need to say much about it. While Jiang Hai was immersed in the land of warmth, the situation on Selene's side was not so good. Early the next morning, those who were arrested by the police, like Augustine and the others, all walked out of the police station. Just like what Jiang Hai said, although they incited the crowd, it was not to rebel, and it was not to spread the news so the police couldn't sue them. After being locked up for a night, these people walked out of the police station dispiritedly. Augustine, what do we do now? The man who was punched last night and lost his teeth covered his swollen face and said with some annoyance. Originally, people like them had a hard life. Before Jiang Hai came, it was still okay. They could still rob, collect protection fees and so on. The police in the town were limited and couldn't manage so many people. But since Jiang Hai came, he gave a lot of money to the police station. Of course, he was referring to the taxes. Now, the Winthrop police station was expanding again and again. In order to make tourists feel safe here, the small police station, which originally only had a dozen people, already had nearly 100 people before Jiang Hai's accident. After Jiang Hai's accident, they expanded again. In a small town police station, there were now more than 200 and 300 police officers. These people searched day and night. They couldn't even steal anything, let alone rob or collect protection fees. There were also more than 30 police cars in the small town. Every day they went back and forth in the small town, making these people very depressed. They really didn't have a place to live, but they weren't willing to find a job like this. They were used to being lazy and didn't dare to be arrogant. In the past few months, the people of Winthrop lived very happily, but these people didn't have a good life. So when Augustine found them, they immediately agreed to Augustine's plan to teach Jiang Hai a lesson. The money that Selene gave was one thing. They were probably the people of Winthrop who wanted to go back to how they were before. But now that they had offended Jiang Hai, they couldn't even live their original lives in the small town. At this time, at the entrance of the police station, people looked at them with eyes full of disgust. This was driving them crazy. Now, they didn't doubt that if they went to buy something, no one would sell it to them. And the people who caused all this were Augustine and Selene's people. Naturally, they had to ask clearly. Don't worry, you guys go home first. I'll give you the news. I'll go ask Mr. Ruffian now. However, at this time, Augustine was also a clay bodhisattva crossing the river. He couldn't even protect himself. Asking him to help these people, he wanted to ask who would help him. He was the main leader of this incident. These hoodlums couldn't survive here, let alone him. But now this was all they could do. They dispersed and returned to their own homes. Some people wanted to buy some food when they went back, but not to mention those restaurants, even the supermarket didn't welcome them. These people could only leave with their tails between their legs. This also made them even more determined to hate Jiang Hai. This time they really had no way out. Because if they wanted to live here, they could only let Jiang Hai leave here. Ignoring these people's experiences, Augustine went to Jiang Hai's seaside villa at this time to look for Peter. Luckily, Peter happened to be there. After he explained the purpose of his visit, Peter smiled. Augustine, don't worry. Augustine, you don't have to worry. You are an official employee of our company. I won't give up on you no matter what. At worst, you can go back to Texas with us and continue to work. As for those people, you have to stabilize them first. I'm looking for people from the Boston authorities to put pressure on the town and let Mayor Wallace let the town hold a referendum. At that time, your friends will all be important votes. Looking at Augustine, Peter said with a smile. But Jiang Hai made it clear that he doesn't support us, and he said such things last night. Frankly speaking, if we hold a referendum now, we may not even get 100 votes. Augustine frowned. To be honest, Augustine did not have any expectations for this referendum. It was really because the difference between the two camps was really too big. Then what if you say that Jiang Hai agrees? Hearing Augustine's words, Peter smiled mysteriously. You mean you have a way to get Jiang Hai to agree? Hearing what Peter said, Augustine Wilson could not help but feel a little excited. If Jiang Hai really agreed, then such a referendum would not be difficult at all. Even if he did not want to admit it, he had to admit that Jiang Hai's influence in Winthrop was too strong. Although he had only been here for a year and had only really done things in the same month, he controlled the most important lifeline of Winthrop: money. As a capitalist society, no one would say no to money, including these townspeople. When the time comes, you'll know. Hearing what Augustine said, Peter did not say much. He just smiled mysteriously. However, he did not notice that at this time, on a tree opposite the open window, a squirrel was lying there, watching everything in front of it. There was a very small camera on its chest. Through the signal, the content and sound captured by this miniature camera directly entered a computer in Jiang Hai's house on the other side of the town. At this time, in front of the computer, Azalina was eating shrimp chips while watching the image in front of her and listening to the content inside. If you want to get Jiang Hai to change his mind, it's definitely impossible to use money. It's probably also impossible to find someone to pressure Jiang Hai. After all, Jiang Hai does not give face to any officials. Since it's not using money or finding someone to intercede, then it can only be one way. Hey, I hope you don't play dirty. You're digging your own grave. Looking at the image in front of her, Azalina laughed softly. If these people were really like what Azalina thought, playing dirty in order to force Jiang Hai to change his mind, then Jiang Hai would not mind letting them know that his dirty tricks were more ruthless than theirs. Chapter 6:13. Phew. Standing in front of the villa's door, Jiang Hai looked at the slightly gloomy sky and couldn't help but exhale a white breath. Of course, at this time he wasn't practicing anything. Although the Dragon Ball in his body has some Xianxia style, the problem is that he doesn't have Xianxia skills. He doesn't know how to control the fog or anything. He also doesn't know how to practice any immortal techniques. And the only reason why he exhaled white breath now is that the weather has started to get cold. Tightening his hoodie, Jiang Hai stretched a little, then stretched his legs and prepared to go out for a run. Since the last time he went to the town to hold a meeting with the townspeople, it has been almost a week. In this week's time, Winthrop has changed a lot. Originally, there were still some townspeople who were hesitant. They said that they were threatened by Jiang Hai's warning. They finally settled down and began to live their previous lives. No one would mention the matter of allowing the chemical factory to enter the city again. They are very satisfied with their current life. They don't want their current good life to be destroyed by the entry of the chemical factory. Especially since Jiang Hai made it clear that these guys are absolutely not allowed to enter the factory. But although this matter was settled, there was still some awkwardness between the people in Jiang Hai's manor and the townspeople. The townspeople didn't know whether Jiang Hai was still angry or not, and Jiang Hai was too lazy to care about them. After solving this matter, Jiang Hai lived an unusual life of a homebody again. He didn't leave the manor these days. However, staying at home every day was still very cool. After doing some simple activities, Jiang Hai also ran along the river in the manor. But before he could run a few steps, he saw a tractor in the distance. It was a tractor that was pulling weeds slowly came over. Hey boss, I haven't seen you run for a while. Seeing Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia, who was driving the tractor, couldn't help but smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled a little awkwardly. Recently, Jiang Hai tried to live a gentle life. Every night, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Shira, Ohilia, Bridget, and Janice, 2 of the 8 girls would go to Jiang Hai's room to sleep. In the morning they would quietly leave. Of course, little Huang and Xiao Bai, who woke up early, protected them as they left. If they went back alone, Jiang Hai wouldn't be at ease. Every day he has a beautiful woman in his arms, and no one would be willing to get up and run. If it wasn't for the fact that yesterday was the last Dregs day, Aphrodite and the others were all busy until late at night and didn't come to Jiang Hai's place, he wouldn't have had the sudden urge to come out for a run today. This was something he would only do when he was in the period of abstinence. Are you ready to pull the grass now? Looking at the grass behind Robbins Garcia, Jiang Hai wisely changed the topic. That's right. Winter is coming soon. We have 27,000 cows to raise this year. The quality of the grass here is so good that I don't plan to buy miscellaneous fodder, such as crushed corn, anymore. There's a lot of shortage in the amount of grass this winter. Looking at the sky, Robbins Garcia couldn't help but whisper. Following his gaze, Jiang Hai also felt a little emotional. In Boston, there wasn't a lot of rain in the summer, but there was a lot of snow in the winter. Just like last year, if that kind of snow was anywhere else, it would definitely be considered a snowstorm. Of course, it was also a snowstorm here, but the people of Winthrop seemed to be used to it because to them, such snowstorms weren't rare. Every year there would be very thick snow here. Last year it was just a little thicker. The snow covering the ground would protect the land and nourish the fertility of the land. Next year it would grow better grass, better grains and better vegetables. Therefore, in the United States, or rather in Winthrop, people didn't dislike snow as much as they thought. In Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon Manor, Robbins Garcia and the others had long been immune to snow. Last year they prepared a lot of grass. Of course, more importantly, they bought a lot of fodder. The fodder was made of crushed corn and some grains. The price wasn't low, but these things were also the main food for the cows in winter. However, after tasting the benefits of grass, Robbins Garcia was no longer prepared to buy fodder this year. It was better to feed them directly, although the amount needed was larger. Therefore, they had already started pulling grass half a month ago. If Jiang Hai hadn't met him today, he might not have known that Robbins Garcia was already preparing fodder for winter. I'll go help. Compared to running, Jiang Hai was also interested in building his own manor, so he said to Robbins Garcia with a smile. Robbins Garcia naturally wouldn't refuse Jiang Hai's kindness. He smiled and motioned for Jiang Hai to get in the car. Jiang Hai somersaulted and jumped onto the back of the tractor, which was in the grass. Then he followed Robbins Garcia towards the direction of the cow shed. Because the weather had turned cold, the cattle would come out of the shed later than in the summer. They would come out of the shed around 8 o'clock. It was only 6 o'clock, so there was still some time. When they pulled the grass to a warehouse next to the cow shed, Jiang Hai found that Belle and Harriman had been waiting here for a long time. Of course, they weren't idle either. Philemon and Burke Dollar were cutting grass on the other side of the field. They needed to make the grass into straw bricks. In other words, they needed to tie up the grass and put it together in a square. Of course, tying up grass like this wasn't a skill in this place. Other people who raise cows and horses would also tie them up. However, they only tied up hay, unlike Jiang Hai who directly tied up grass. Seeing Jiang Hai come over to help, Belle and Harriman couldn't help but smile. This made things a lot easier for them. After jumping down from the tractor, Jiang Hai and the other two brought the grass to the warehouse. As Robbins Garcia pulled the grass again, Jiang Hai also learned to tie up the grass with the other two. Putting on gloves, Jiang Hai tied up the grass with them. He had to admit that it wasn't easy to tie up the grass. First, the grass was soft. It wasn't like dry grass, which was upright and easy to shape. Grass was soft and slippery, especially since it was still morning and there was a layer of dew on it, so it wasn't easy to tie it up. Second, the length of the grass was the same. Of course, the length of the dry grass was different too. But the dry grass was hard. After tying it up, they just had to cut it with a guillotine, and the dry grass would become the same length. However, the length of the grass guillotine was uneven. Even veterans like Belle and Harriman couldn't tie it up very quickly, let alone a newbie like Jiang Hai. Although Jiang Hai's strength was much greater than theirs, Jiang Hai's speed was much slower than theirs. They had tied up two, but Jiang Hai had only tied up one, which looked a little weird. Phew, this is much more tiring than running. Looking at the fruits of his labor, Jiang Hai stood up, wiped the sweat on his forehead and said helplessly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle and Harriman both laughed. Boss, it's Halloween next week, do we need to prepare? After laughing, Belle changed the topic very naturally. He looked at Jiang Hai and asked him. But after hearing his words, Jiang Hai was a little stunned. Halloween. To be honest, Jiang Hai knew about this festival, but he had never celebrated it. Because although Wuxia knew about this festival, to be honest, not many people celebrate this festival. Only some games would arrange some special missions during this time, but Jiang Hai wasn't interested in these things. The official date of Halloween was November 1st, but on the night of October 31st, children would run around in the small town, wearing some strange clothes just like in the movies and shouting things like, "Give me candy or make trouble." Generally, at this time, people who are knocked on the door will take out some candy for these children to eat. Of course, there were also some families who wanted to save trouble and would give these children some pocket money to send them away. Jiang Hai's place is located outside Winthrop town, so it is estimated that no children will come to play, so Belle asked. When he came here last year there was no Halloween. At that time, to be honest, everyone didn't know Jiang Hai very well, and Jiang Hai didn't mean to integrate into the town, so naturally no one would come here. But this year, after all, Jiang Hai still has some relationship with the town. If someone comes here and Jiang Hai is not prepared, then it won't be good. Well, this is a good idea. He rubbed his chin. Although Jiang Hai was a homebody and hated trouble, it was still a holiday. It wasn't like he had autism. If there were kids coming over to play, he wouldn't refuse. But he was so far away, so it would be difficult. I'll buy some candy in a while. Clapping his hands, Jiang Hai said to Belle with a smile. His family really didn't prepare these things, so he needed to go to town to prepare. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle and Harriman couldn't help but laugh. After entering November, the festivals in the United States became more and more special. This was also one of the favorite months of the year for American children. November was Halloween, and the end of November, which was the fourth Sunday, was Thanksgiving. After this month, December was the most important Christmas and New Year's Day. Before the new year, the manor will also usher in a new wave of savings. With Jiang Hai's generosity, he will definitely let his subordinates have a good new year. This is something that no one needs to remind Jiang Hai of. By the way, boss, you also have to buy some jack-o'-lanterns, these are also important. Hearing that Jiang Hai decided to buy candy, Harriman couldn't help but remind him, for fear that Jiang Hai would forget. For his reminder, Jiang Hai also smiled and responded. Although he doesn't know why he wants to buy jack-o'-lanterns, he will still abide by the local customs. A buddy told Xiao Fei that there are a lot of asterisks in the novel, so Xiao Fei took a look and found that a person's name was censored, Peter Yerte. God knows why this name was censored. Is it that even foreign names are not allowed to be written in the future? Vomiting blood. Chapter 6:14. After tying up the fodder for more than an hour, Jiang Hai also went to the stable and looked at little Xia. But at this time, after a year of raising, little Xia had completely grown up. He was much taller than an ordinary horse. And the most important thing was that little Xia seemed to have mutated because of Jiang Hai's spiritual energy. His head seemed to be slightly bigger than an ordinary Shire horse. Jiang Hai was more than 190 centimeters tall. In front of little Xia, he didn't even reach his shoulder. In other words, this horse was at least 2 meters tall. This didn't include the horse's head. After feeding him the carrots, Jiang Hai deliberately let him out. With his strong jump, Jiang Hai jumped on the horse's back. He didn't need to wear a saddle or anything like that. He rode little Xia and trotted on the field for a while. Shire horses were different from ordinary horses. Ordinary horses liked to run. Horses were born to run. But Shire horses were different. This kind of horse was too heavy. It was like a big fatty. It could run, but it couldn't run for a long time. This was because its bones couldn't bear it. This was the main problem. Therefore, Jiang Hai and little Xia trotted for about half an hour before Jiang Hai took little Xia back to his villa. When he returned to the villa, the 5 girls in the villa had already gotten up. But Azalina was always floating around. Jiang Hai didn't know where she was. Little Yed, Daliana, and Marian were preparing breakfast. Bernice was exercising on the second floor. After Jiang Hai entered, he greeted them and then went to take a bath. After taking a bath, he told them that he was going to drive to Winthrop. When Jiang Hai's shield entered Winthrop, the town's residents also saw Jiang Hai. However, the atmosphere between them and Jiang Hai was still a bit awkward. They didn't treat Jiang Hai as an enemy like a few days ago. They even hid far away. But they also didn't take the initiative to greet him like before. Jiang Hai didn't care about the changes in these townsfolk. He drove to the parking lot. After parking the car, he entered the town's shopping street. After all, it was already the end of October. The weather in Winthrop was cold. It wasn't a good time to travel. Although the beach could still be visited, even during the hottest time of the day, people couldn't go to the sea. Most of the people who came here to play in the sea. Now that they couldn't go to the sea, naturally there were fewer people who came here. Although the travel agency had already reduced the price in winter, the originally crowded Winthrop was obviously much less crowded at this time. But even so, there were still some tourists, about 100 of them. They looked around the shopping street. Since the opening of the shopping street, it had indeed become an attractive spot for tourists. On this street, the American Museum of History and the India Museum were obviously good places to visit. They were also free of charge. The same was true for the cathedral on this block. These places gave people a feeling of a scenic spot. The things sold here, whether in terms of price or quality, were much cheaper than those sold in China. Moreover, they were brought back from the United States. The 13 slots would also increase unknowingly. Therefore, the commercial street, which originally had high hopes, was now becoming more and more important. According to the financial report that Moses Adams submitted to Jiang Hai last month, the shopping street's net profit was $1.7 million last month alone. Of course, this referred to the profit, not the total profit. After all, the price of labor, shop rent, and goods still had to be taken into account. But even so, they still made more than $1 million. Almost every shop made $20,000 to $30,000. But it was the Native American shop that made the most money. The ginseng, maple syrup, and Native American jewelry such as wolf fangs, were all sold at a very high price. This month, the shop had made $410,000 in net income. This shop was jointly owned by Jianghai, the town, and the Iroquois tribe. Jianghai took 20% of the profits, the town took 20%, and the Iroquois took 60%. The Iroquois were very happy about this. Usually, it would be good if they could sell their goods for $50,000. But now they had sold their goods for $250,000. They bought a lot of things back to the mountains. Their relationship with Winthrop was getting closer and closer. Of course, the one who made the most money was still Jianghai. Last month, Jianghai had earned more than $900,000, almost $1 million just from the shop rent and his share of the profits. In addition to the rental of the villa and the share of the shooting range, Jianghai had earned nearly $2 million from the town's tourism industry. Of course, the town's tourism industry was still far from its peak. According to Moses Adams, if Jianghai's ocean paradise was built, he could earn more than $20 million a year from Winthrop's tourism industry, although $20 million was not a small amount. However, Jianghai didn't really care about this money. After all, he earned a lot more from selling his body than this money. This year he earned more than $1 billion by selling cattle. Next year he will also sell fish. Jianghai felt that it was not difficult for his income to exceed $3 billion. This tourism industry was actually more due to Jianghai's actions to stabilize the town. As far as the current situation was concerned, it was still quite good because he was already above the town's residents. Jianghai. While thinking, Jianghai strolled around the commercial street, looking for a shop selling pumpkin lanterns and candy. But not long after, a voice sounded. Hearing this voice, Jianghai looked back and found that Shenty Clive was standing in front of a shop at this time, holding a bag of clothes in her hand. When she saw Jianghai, her eyes were obviously a little complicated. Sandy, what a coincidence. Looking at this girl, the first girl who made him have the impulse to confirm a relationship with her, Jianghai also smiled. Although now it seems that the two of them did not get together by accident. After all, they used to have feelings for each other. As for now, Jianghai was not sure if it was right for him to continue to flirt with other girls. Yeah, it's really a coincidence. Hearing Jianghai's words, Sandy gently combed her hair and looked at Jianghai and said, "Are you here to buy clothes? Is the town busy recently?" Looking at her, Jianghai asked her with a smile. "The town is fine, it's basically on the right track. I have nothing to do today, so I came to take a look and buy some clothes to wear." Hearing Jianghai's words, Shenty Clive smiled and said, "The town is really calm recently. This kind of life hasn't appeared for a long time. After all, there are disputes where there are people. When the town has more tourists, there will naturally be a lot of rumors. The general quality of tourists who go abroad to play in the Wuxia is still very high. But there are spoiled people everywhere, so Winthrop often encounters some very strange tourists. For example, those who drank too much and caused trouble, those who insisted on buying a gun after shooting targets, or those who insisted on taking the bullets with them, or those who insisted on swimming in the sea. Once these people caused trouble, the town's police would take them away. Those who were drunk were easy to deal with. They would be locked up until they sobered up and compensated according to the price. As for those who caused trouble, education was also the priority. Of course, if they make trouble in the gun shop, they will not be allowed to enter in the future. This is inevitable. As the weather turned cold, there were fewer tourists, but last week there was a boycott of Jianghai, and the town hall was also very busy. This week was finally completely peaceful, and Shenty Clive can also have a good day of rest. However, she couldn't stay at home. After sleeping in, she decided to go shopping. She didn't expect to meet Jianghai. She had to admit that there was a lot of fate between the two of them. "What are you doing here today? Are you here to inspect or to buy things?" After explaining her situation, Shenty Clive couldn't help but look at Jianghai. She remembered that Jianghai is quite a homebody. If there is no reason, he will not leave his home, especially when the weather is not very good recently. Buy things, inspect, what the hell? Isn't Halloween coming soon, so I'm going to buy some candy and pumpkins. Jianghai shrugged his shoulders. He obviously doesn't like the word inspection. Sounds like he is a leader. Do I have to pull up my pants and hold a large teacup in my hand? Hey, I didn't expect you to be so childish. I happen to have time, I'll tell you what to buy. Hearing Jianghai's intention, Shenty Clive couldn't help but smile, and subconsciously said to Jianghai. Hearing her words, Jianghai and she couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. Then the two looked at each other and smiled. Without saying anything, they walked towards the shop in the distance. After walking for a short distance, Shenty Clive chose a shop. Halloween is a Christian holiday. Legend has it that 2,000 years ago, the Catholic Church set November 1st as the Day of Saints. In 500 BC, the Celts living in Ireland, Scotland, and Scotland moved the program forward by one day, which was October 31st. However, they believed that that day was the official end of winter and the beginning of a new year, the day when the harsh winter began. At that time, people believed that the souls of the deceased would return to their places of residence on that day and look for living creatures in the bodies of the living to be reborn. This was also the only hope for people to be reborn after death. In the beginning, people just extinguished the fires, lights, and so on so that the undead couldn't find humans. Later on, humans would dress up as demons and ghosts to scare off the undead. Of course, these are all legends. I'm just explaining the origin of Halloween to you. Walking into the shop, Cindy Clive explained to Jiang Hai. After all, she used to be a primary school teacher, so she had these stories at her fingertips. Hearing her explanation, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod. This Western Ghost Festival is really magical. Chapter 6:15. After all, your manor is too far away from the town. I don't think the children will go there. But if you want to experience the festive atmosphere, you should prepare more. I know you don't lack money anyway. After explaining the origin of Halloween to Jiang Hai, SH20 Clive smiled and picked up the things. There were a lot of things to prepare for Halloween. In addition to candies, there were some other things such as toffee apples. In the past, toffee apples were often given to children because it was close to Halloween, which was the time when apples were harvested. Then people would put the apples on bamboo sticks and rotate them in the toffee syrup. Then they would go to Okat's to get some nuts. It was a little like Wuxia's candied haws. According to SH20 Clive, when she was young, every family would give toffee apples to their children. But she didn't know when it started, but some adults were bad. But if they put needles and blades in the apples, children would accidentally cut themselves or hurt themselves when eating. Americans cherished themselves very much. Decades ago, they said that freshwater was polluted and freshwater fish couldn't be eaten. But until now, not many people ate freshwater fish. As for the bones, only Asian carp had them. Many freshwater fish only had one bone, just like seafood. But people still didn't eat them. It was because Americans were careful that they didn't give toffee apples during the holidays. Next was pumpkin pie. Americans especially liked pie. This kind of food from Eastern Europe was very popular in the streets and alleys of the United States. Almost all the fast food restaurants in the United States had this kind of thing, but to be honest, Jiang Hai didn't like it very much. In his opinion, this kind of dessert was too sweet, and the taste was too greasy. He would rather eat cake than this kind of dessert. In Jiang Hai's manor there were pumpkins. Moreover, they weren't small. Therefore, Jiang Hai didn't have anything to do with it. He came here mainly to buy candies and lights. Jiang Hai was a typical Sagittarius. If you directly asked him to spend a lot of money to buy something, he would be reluctant. But if you let him know that it was worth it, he would buy a lot of it, regardless of whether it was useful or not. Candy was on sale for Halloween, so Jiang Hai didn't check if anyone was eating it. Looking at the candy in front of him, Jiang Hai also grabbed it with his big hands. While SH20 Clive was looking for pumpkin lanterns for Jiang Hai had already grabbed dozens of caddies of candy. Most importantly, he had grabbed the best ones. Oh my god, are you going to open a candy store? SH20 Clive slapped her forehead when she saw several baskets full of candies. Although she knew that Jiang Hai wasn't short of money, this was too wasteful. It's okay. It's cheap now. After buying it, the people in the manor can also eat it, and the production date is very close. Looking at so many candies in front of him, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed. The candies that Jiang Hai packed were all excellent things. Chocolate, all of them were Ferrero and MMM bean. The scientific name should be called MME, sugar on the outside and chocolate on the inside. Jiang Hai remembered that when he was in junior high school, he had a classmate who liked to eat this, but later their relationship became strained. This kind of chocolate came from the United States. It tasted good and was very popular among children. Because it was colorful and beautiful, there were also many other kinds of candies. When Jiang Hai bought things, he naturally only bought the expensive ones. As long as they tasted good, he didn't care about other things, although he felt that he had bought a little too much. But if he bought too much, he wouldn't care. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, SH20 Clive couldn't help but laugh. This guy was really cheap. These candies must have cost dozens of dollars. As expected, the total cost of the candies was $70, which was more than $400 in RMB. Including the jack-o'-lanterns and the like, the total cost was $100. But Jiang Hai didn't care about this. He took the candies and pumpkin lanterns and left the store. Wow, so many delicious candies. Uncle, Did you prepare this for Halloween? But as soon as he took out the candies, a group of children wearing masks ran across the street. This commercial street was prohibited from entering. The goods were all loaded from the back door of the store, so there were almost no bicycles on this commercial street. It was precisely because there were no cars that the adults were assured to let the children play here, even if there were many foreigners here. Among them, a sharp-eyed child saw the candies that Jiang Hai had brought out at a glance and couldn't help but take off the Iron Man mask on his face. Iron Man? Well, Jiang Hai didn't understand why it was Iron Man, but the child still looked at Jiang Hai in surprise. Yeah, you are welcome to visit when the time comes. Hearing the child's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. There is so much delicious food, we will definitely go, but uncle, where is your home? When the child heard that these candies were really prepared for Halloween, he couldn't help but get excited, and then his eyes flashed as he asked Jiang Hai. My home is at the end of that road, Soaring Dragon Manor. Pointing to the road out of the village, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Soaring Dragon Manor? But after hearing Jiang Hai's words, the child here looked at Jiang Hai with some confusion. Obviously he didn't know much about this manor. Jiang Hai is still very mysterious in this town. I know it's the biggest manor here. My father went to pull the replaced parts. At this time, another black child stood up, raised his hand and said loudly, Pulled the parts? What do you mean? When he heard the child's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little strange. What does he mean by pulling the parts? I really doubt if you are running a farm. In your manor there are basically automatic machines. There will always be times when machines break down. The broken parts naturally need to be replaced with new ones, but the rusty parts that are replaced are directly thrown away. The country doesn't allow it. Moreover, they are also iron, so naturally they can be sold for money. Although her family didn't run a manor, it was obvious that Sh20 Clive knew more than him. When he heard her words, Jiang Hai suddenly thought that it seemed to be true. Before he bought the cow, he saw a pile of rusty scrap metal in the warehouse of his manor. At that time he muttered that he didn't know where they came from. So those were the parts that had been replaced from the rust. You are a rich person. If the parts are rusty, you will directly replace them with new ones. But most farm owners don't have that much money. They buy the parts that are no longer used in your big manor and then remove the rust. Basically, they can use it for 2 to 3 years. Seeing that Jiang Hai remembered, Sh20 Clive also smiled and said to him, Oh, Uncle's manor is the Soaring Dragon Manor. You are welcome to come and play. Jiang Hai touched his nose a little awkwardly. He wasn't a loser. He was, but he definitely wasn't a representative of struggling. He had almost never struggled. From the beginning he wasn't that short of money. He sold the gems for 330 million. He bought the manor for 280 million. Although the remaining 50 million wasn't a lot, it was definitely not a small amount. When he had spent most of his money, he would have another source of income. Until now, Jiang Hai really wasn't short of money. He still had more than $1 billion in savings in his bank account. Therefore he didn't work hard on small and medium farms. He wasn't very clear about the operation of these manors. Now that he heard Sh20 Clive's words, Jiang Hai subconsciously ignored it. He squatted down and looked at the children in front of him. He took out a handful of candies from the bag and stuffed them into the children's hands. Then he smiled and said. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the children naturally nodded with joy. Then they happily watched Jiang Hai leave. Jiang Hai also waved to them before leaving the commercial street. When he left the commercial street, Jiang Hai wanted to invite Sh20 Clive for a meal, but she refused. She said that she already had an appointment with her family. Jiang Hai couldn't say anything. In the beginning he decided to let nature take its course with Sh20 Clive. He also considered the current situation between him and Sh20 Clive. Although it was somewhat difficult to accept, it was still in Jiang Hai's thoughts. Returning to the car alone, Jiang Hai threw the things into the back seat, then started the engine and left the town. After returning to the manor, seeing that Jiang Hai had brought back so many candies, Daliana, Marian, Bernice, and Xiaoyu were very interested. They took the jack-o'-lanterns and began to decorate. As for the origin of the jack-o'-lanterns, Sh20 Clive also told Jiang Hai that it was a story from Ireland. In Ireland there was a man named Jack. He was very stingy, very stingy. As long as he didn't spend money, he would even dare to play tricks on demons. It was precisely because of this that after he died, heaven didn't want him because he was too stingy. Hell didn't want him because he played tricks on demons. In the end, he could only take his only property, a white radish. He hollowed it out and used a candle as a lamp to illuminate the ground. At first, this lamp was made from white radish and cabbage. However, after Europeans came to North America, they found that pumpkins were very good. It was precisely because of this that jack-o'-lanterns were invented. Now jack-o'-lanterns were popularized all over the world. The jack-o'-lanterns that Jiang Hai bought were all very good. There was no need to use a candle. It had its own lamp and battery. As long as the switch was turned on, it could always be illuminated. The four girls and Jiang Hai's interest in jack-o'-lanterns hadn't died down yet. So after packing up the candies, they took these jack-o'-lanterns and decorated the manor. Especially the periphery of the manor, there were a lot of decorations. It really looked like a festival. Chapter 6:16. Xiaobai Xiaohuang, be careful. Qiuqiu, you have to keep an eye on the sky. Jiang Hai tightened his grip on his gun and whispered to the dogs beside him. Then he took a deep breath and walked into the forest in front of him. Today was the 29th of October. It was getting closer and closer to the end of October. Jiang Hai's manor was still as busy as ever. The cowboys looked after the cattle, the fishermen checked the movements of the underwater fish. Although the wine had already been stored in barrels, Aphrodite and the others were not idle. It was already late autumn and the vegetables in the garden had to be harvested. Winthrop was not like some cities in the south where vegetables could be grown all year round. Here, vegetables and food were only grown for one season. After the vegetables were picked, they were sent to the warehouse for storage. Basically, they were vegetables that were easy to store. For example, radishes, pumpkins, cabbages, sprouts, potatoes, sweet potatoes, cabbages, winter melons, and so on. These vegetables were Jiang Hai's winter food. They were placed in the special warehouse and the temperature could be lowered. It was just like the cellar that Jiang Hai's family dug to store vegetables when they lived in a bungalow. It was no problem to store them for one winter. However, Jiang Hai would feel a little uncomfortable if he did not eat fresh vegetables. He was already considering whether to build a greenhouse next spring. This way he could eat fresh vegetables all year round. Moreover, he did not plant much and he did not sell them for money. Therefore, the fertility of the land should not be a problem. Because Aphrodite and the others had been preparing these vegetables recently, Littleya, Bernice, Daliana, and Marion would also help. In the whole manor, the only idle person should be Jiang Hai. Oh, there were also two idle people, Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy. They were in the wine cellar every day drinking red wine. According to their words, they wanted to know when this batch of red wine would be divided and what standard it was. Jiang Hai didn't understand these messy things. After all, there were specializations in this industry. As for Jiang Hai, a few days ago when he went to prepare for Halloween, it was just a small episode. Recently, after waking up every morning, he went to help tie up the grass. It was almost winter and there were still a lot of things to prepare in the manor. But at around 9 o'clock in the morning, the cowboys all went to herd the cattle. Jiang Hai could not tie up the grass himself, so he had nothing to do. After staying at home for a few days, Jiang Hai suddenly remembered that he seemed to have said a few months ago that he wanted to see his own forest. He had not seen it for so long, so he could give it a try this time. When Jiang Hai first entered the forest, he was led by Robbins Garcia and Edouard Anderson. But now, Jiang Hai was much more powerful than he was a year ago. Not only had his physical fitness reached 4 times the human limit, his experience was also much stronger than before. This also gave him the courage to enter the forest alone. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai picked up his gun, put on his outdoor clothes and left with Xiaohuang, Xiaobai and Qiuqiu. Recently, Dai Feng was transferred away by Azalina, and no one knew what he was doing mysteriously. When he passed by the swimming pool, the Greenland seal that Jiang Hai bought was playing happily with 2 dolphins. These 3 little guys, since coming to Jiang Hai's manor, really came to enjoy life. Every day, in addition to eating, playing and sleeping, their days were quite good. But fortunately, they also knew that Jiang Hai was their master. When they saw Jiang Hai coming over, they all looked at Jiang Hai. After greeting them, Jiang Hai took the 2 dogs and an eagle into the forest. As soon as they entered the forest, the sky, which was originally quite bright outside, became a lot darker. This was also Jiang Hai's fault. This was because when Jiang Hai nourished the ranch, the forest was not left behind, and it was also bathed in the light of the spirit energy. The spirit energy could improve the pasture, cattle, and fish. Naturally, it could also improve these trees. In this year, these trees grew quite fast. Fortunately, the people in Jiang Hai's manor watched the trees grow every day and did not feel anything, and the people outside could not see the appearance of the forest. Otherwise, a botanist would find that the trees in Jiang Hai's manor grew better in 1 year than in 3 years in other places. Now, it was not an exaggeration to describe Jiang Hai's forest as leafy and lush. The leaves that sheltered the sun completely blocked the sun. Only spots of sunlight shone into the forest through the gaps of the top leaves. But even so, in the forest, the grass that was almost waist-high still blocked Jiang Hai's vision. Carrying the gun on his back, Jiang Hai picked up the cold-forged knife that he specially bought and began to cut the grass to open a path. Modern knives and ancient cold weapons were actually very different. The hardness of a knife mainly depended on the material and forging method. The abbreviation of this hardness was called HRC. It did not mean that the higher the hardness, the better the knife. If the hardness was high, the saber would be brittle. If the saber was flexible, the hardness would be low. This was inevitable. The cold weapons of ancient Wuxia could be said to be extremely well developed. The best sabers should be during the Tang and Song dynasties. However, after the Tang and Song dynasties, it was definitely a chaotic era. After the Tang dynasty, it was the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms. After the Song dynasty, it was replaced by the Yuan dynasty, so these forging methods were not passed down. Although he was unwilling to admit it, the best knives in modern times were made by Japan, which followed the forging methods of the Tang dynasty. During the anti-Japanese war, the samurai swords of Japan were much better in quality than the knives used in China. Of course, now they were all made by machines, and the hardness could be as much as one wanted. The toughness of the average saber was between 50 and 60. This was also the best saber that could be bought. However, Jiang Hai's knife was different. His Nippon knife, also called the ********, was specially ordered by the manufacturer behind the outdoor goods store in the town. Its hardness was 65 HRC. Cutting iron nails and the like was not much harder than cutting a piece of wood. Moreover, it was very flexible and did not reflect light, because it was not only made of steel, but also some other metals to ensure its toughness. It was not an exaggeration to say that this knife could cut through hair. Jiang Hai's knife continued to swing. Soon, the grass in front of him fell down, giving him a path to move around. However, just when Jiang Hai was happily chopping, Chirps, who was flying in the air, suddenly screamed. Hearing its slightly panicked cry, Jiang Hai could not help but frown and instantly picked up the gun. And Goldie and Xiao Bai, who had been following him, suddenly crouched on the ground. Their noses kept moving, trying to smell something different, but unfortunately they sniffed for a long time and did not find anything. They raised their heads with some doubts, but just as they raised their heads, Goldie suddenly pounced on Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai was also looking around, so he did not notice. In an instant he was pushed down by Goldie. After being pushed down, Jiang Hai panicked for a moment, but he wasn't worried. After all, he knew that Goldie wouldn't harm him. But when he looked up, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He was wondering why he did not find any clues when he looked around. Even Goldie and Xiao Bai did not find anything, but Chirp saw it. It turned out that his enemy was coiled up in a tree at this time. Yes, coiled up in a tree because it was a snake, a huge snake. *****, it's a water dragon. Why is this thing here? Looking at the huge monster that was about 5 meters long coiled up in the tree and looking up at him, Jiang Hai instantly had goosebumps all over his body. Originally, he just wanted to see the mountain lion and its babies. Why is there such a monster in the forest? Shouldn't this thing exist in South America? What the hell is this? Just when Jiang Hai was puzzled, the snake was very excited. It kept sticking out its tongue, then tied its lower body to the tree and slowly swam towards Jiang Hai. Seeing this guy move, Jiang Hai instantly raised his gun. When the gun was raised, the snake stopped moving, but it did not leave either. It just looked at Jiang Hai and kept circling there. Looking at its appearance, Jiang Hai could not help but be a little puzzled. What is this guy's background? Why is it here? This guy is clearly from South America, so why is it in my manor? And most importantly, shouldn't this guy be hibernating now? Why is it still living so happily? He glanced at Goldie and Xiao Bai beside him and found that the nervous dog was squatting down as if nothing had happened. It was as if they did not see the big snake in front of them. ****, what's going on? Did you guys betray me? Looking at the 2 dogs playing happily beside him, Jiang Hai said gloomily, "My luck is too bad. How did I encounter such a probability? This is too unlucky." Hiss hiss. Seeing that Jiang Hai was still a little vigilant, the giant water serpent slowly swam down from the tree. Its emotionless eyes glanced at Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai saw a trace of emotion in its eyes. It seemed to be saying that there was no harm to it, which made Jiang Hai a little puzzled. Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled eyes, the water serpent came to the ground and then slowly swam forward. It deliberately walked a very wide path and pressed the grass under its body, as if it was opening a path for Jiang Hai. After walking for a short distance, it deliberately looked at Jiang Hai as if waiting for him. Didn't they say that after the establishment of the imperial court, animals are not allowed to become spirits? Well, maybe this is the United States and it's not under the control of the imperial court. Looking at the human-like water serpent, Jiang Hai frowned. It wants me to follow it? Although he was a little nervous, Jiang Hai was still prepared to take a look. Holding the gun, he looked around vigilantly and followed the water serpent into the distance. Chapter 6:17. Where is it taking me? You two guys are too unreliable. Are you going to defect to the enemy at the last minute? While walking carefully, Jiang Hai muttered softly. At the same time, he looked at Goldie and Xiao Bai, who were still playing at his feet, and couldn't help but kick them. After being kicked, Goldie and Xiao Bai both looked at Jiang Hai with confusion in their eyes. They didn't know what they did wrong. Phew. Looking at them, Jiang Hai took a deep breath and continued to follow this guy inside. This forest wasn't very big, but it wasn't particularly small either. Jiang Hai had never entered the depths of the forest before. It seemed that today was the furthest he had ever walked. As he kept walking, Jiang Hai found an open space in the forest unknowingly. The vegetation on the ground here seemed to have been deliberately removed, and in the middle of this empty space, there was a large puddle? Well, if it was a lake, then this place was too small. At most, it was a puddle. Jiang Hai didn't know how the puddle was formed. Maybe it was because of the underground water, but at this time the puddle was a little muddy. And in the distance of the puddle there was a huge hole. This hole was directly dug out, and there were even some grass and the like inside. When Jiang Hai walked to this open space, a few green lights appeared in the hole. There's an ambush? Looking at the green lights, Jiang Hai's heart thumped. He wanted to see what the hell was going on. If the situation was bad, he would run away quickly. But before he could run, the owner of the green lights had already walked out of the cave. When he saw the owner of the green lights, although Jiang Hai was still shocked, he didn't care anymore. Because the owner of these green lights was none other than the North American mountain lion that Jiang Hai once fed spiritual energy here. At this time, the original lion cubs had grown to the size of a medium-sized dog. When they saw that it was Jiang Hai, they opened their mouths and ran over quickly with their tongues hanging out. The last one to come out was the huge North American mountain lion. It was the guy that Du Feynman thought was a North American lion-like creature. However, this guy had simply absorbed a little bit of Jiang Hai's spiritual energy. In addition, he hunted rabbits and pheasants that contained spiritual energy every day, so he broke through the limits of his body. It's you guys. Looking at the little guys running over, Jiang Hai also squatted down and hugged the little guys running over, then rubbed their heads hard. At this time, the little guys were also jumping around Jiang Hai excitedly. Looking at the appearance of these little guys, Jiang Hai laughed. He didn't expect them to grow so fast. Ayo ayo. At this time, the North American mountain lion mother walked over and used its huge head to nudge Jiang Hai. Then it cried out twice to show its welcome to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. He was born to like these fierce animals, especially when these big cats were acting cute. It was really quite strange. Okay, you guys live here. What's the situation with the water gloom? After patting these guys' heads, Jiang Hai looked at the water gloom in the distance. He remembered that this guy brought him here. It seemed that the mountain lion family didn't have any hostility towards the water gloom. This made Jiang Hai a little hesitant. What's going on? Maybe it felt that Jiang Hai was looking over. The water gloom swam to the side of the water hole at this time and looked at Jiang Hai. Then it used its tail to whip the water surface of the water hole twice. Then a huge figure floated out of the water hole. When he saw this figure, Jiang Hai couldn't help but gasp, because the figure that floated out of the water hole was none other than a huge crocodile. He had to admit that when a crocodile rose from the water, especially from the very turbid water, it was even more terrifying than the water gloom above his head. Looking at this guy floating up, Jiang Hai couldn't help but gulp. However, after this crocodile floated up, it didn't move when it saw Jiang Hai. Instead, it looked at Jiang Hai with its emotionless eyes and slowly climbed out of the water. It looked at him from afar, just like the water gloom. This scene seems a little familiar. Looking at the crocodile and the water gloom standing there, Jiang Hai's brain suddenly seemed to stop working. A scene suddenly emerged in his mind. The crocodile and the water gloom, two creatures that shouldn't have appeared here, appeared in front of him. This made Jiang Hai a little confused, but the moment the scene appeared in his sealed memory, Jiang Hai remembered them. In that wild animal warehouse. Oh my god, it's you guys. Looking at the appearance of the snake and the crocodile, Jiang Hai instantly slapped his head. He suddenly understood why Little Yellow, Little White, and Chirps didn't make any movements at all. Instead, it was as if they didn't see them at all. Jiang Hai looked at the snake and crocodile. Also, why did the snake and crocodile coexist peacefully, and why was the mountain lion here? There was only one answer: spiritual energy. Animals were much more sensitive than humans. Although Jiang Hai didn't know how these two guys escaped, after escaping, they clearly found Jiang Hai and felt that the spiritual energy in Jiang Hai's place was different from other places. The reason why they coexisted peacefully was because they felt the familiar feeling in each other's bodies. It was precisely because of this that the three of them were in the forest, and the water gloom led Jiang Hai here after seeing him. "It's you guys." Letting go of the small mountain lion beside him, Jiang Hai walked in front of the two big guys and touched their heads hard. However, snakes and crocodiles are cold-blooded animals after all. They're not kittens or puppies. They're not used to being touched by others. After being touched by Jiang Hai twice, they took the initiative to move away. "Although I don't know how you came here, this is not bad. There is enough food in this forest for you to eat. You can live here in the future." Looking at the two guys in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. To be honest, Jiang Hai originally wanted to raise these two guys. Now it seems like a good choice. The sand tiger shark has aura, so I raised it into a great white shark. The mountain lion has aura, so I raised it into a North American lion. I'm going to focus on the two of you. What will you become in the future? What is the biggest snake? It seems that the water gloom is the biggest snake. Then what is bigger than the water gloom? What is the biggest crocodile? Looking at the crocodile and snake in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. This time with these three guys guarding his forest, it should be safe. Now he has begun to name these guys, but maybe because he is not in the right state today he did not succeed. But he was still looking forward to it. If this big snake grows bigger than the average snake, and if this crocodile also develops a second time, Jiang Hai remembered that the biggest snake was the titanoboa. Legend has it that after the extinction of the dinosaurs, it was the most powerful cold-blooded animal. The largest snake can grow to more than 10 meters. If Jiang Hai trains it carefully, this water gloom may have a chance to return to the glory of its ancestors. Thinking about it, at that time, the plot of the Anaconda disaster movie may not necessarily not happen in reality. As for the crocodile, the biggest one should be the giant crocodile, which is also more than 10 meters long. It is used to kill dinosaurs to eat. Jiang Hai does not have any dinosaurs here. But if this crocodile can also grow to more than 10 meters long, just thinking about it is a very good thing. Jiang Hai played with them for a while. When he was about to leave, he injected some aura into the three guys and one beast. Those small mountain lions have not grown up yet, so Jiang Hai gave them all some aura. After everything was done, Jiang Hai left the forest with Xiaobai, Goldie, and Qiuqiu. I wonder what this forest will look like in the future? Thinking about it, I am really looking forward to it. At this time, Jiang Hai's manor is considered impregnable. The front side is defended by Jiang Hai, his cowboys, and his sailors. In the sea there are two big sharks, more than 10 dolphins, and a sea monster, the king sour squid, to defend. On the land there is the water gloom, the crocodile, and the mountain lions to defend. Now Jiang Hai wants to let people try and test his strength. However, just as Jiang Hai is in high spirits, there are people in Boston who do not look so good. Since Celanese' last attack was disrupted by Jiang Hai, Celanese has no means to do anything in Winthrop. No matter what they say, no one will listen to them, including Celanese delegation and the gangsters. They can't even buy a bottle of water in Winthrop. Because of this, after that night, Celanese delegation left on the third day. However, the gangsters stayed in town. Every day they rely on Augustine to buy things from Boston and bring them back to eat and drink. Their lives are really not good. The person in charge of Celanese, Peter ****, who had been chased out of the town, found Faraday Kirk, who had asked them to take over Winthrop and guaranteed their success. Originally, Faraday Kirk wanted to deny it, but he did not expect that the people of Celanese had recorded their conversation. The people of Celanese said to either help them settle the matter, or report him to the authorities. The money he received was enough to keep him in prison for the rest of his life. He wanted to pay compensation, but Celanese people did not want it. Therefore he could only bitterly ask for his connections. He went to Winthrop and asked his old friend for help. But after listening to his words, his old friend didn't say anything. He just showed Faraday the list of taxes that Jiang Hai will have to pay next year. This made Faraday completely stunned. Next year, Jiang Hai will have to pay more than 600 million yuan in taxes. 400 million was to be paid to the federal government, and about 200 million was to be paid to the state. Although Boston is a metropolitan area, it is definitely at the bottom of the top 10 metropolitan areas in the United States. It was not New York and it did not care about a few $100 million. They cared a lot. Could be said that Jiang Hai was their god of wealth. Just like Jiang Hai said, no one dared to touch him. Chapter 6:18. Are you sure someone will come tonight? You're so ferocious. Why would the kids come looking for you? While hanging the freshly made pumpkin on the door, Bernice looked at Jiang Hai strangely and asked. As early as a few days ago, Jiang Hai said that there will be kids coming to ask for candy tonight, but Bernice has been in a state of doubt. Because Jiang Hai's reputation in the town is indeed not very good, and the most important thing is that Jiang Hai is really too far from the town. If he drives slowly it will take him half an hour. If he walks it will take him more than an hour. Will the kids walk for more than an hour to ask for candy? Even if they are willing, their parents won't be willing. It should be, maybe, probably, almost someone will come. Hearing what Bernice said, Jiang Hai touched his nose a little awkwardly. To be honest, he was also on a whim, but whether someone will come or not, he is not sure. Only you will believe the words of children. Okay, I'm hanging it up, I hope someone will come, but I'll take a picture first. Hearing Jiang Hai's slightly awkward words, Bernice glanced at him contemptuously, then smiled and hung the last pumpkin. After jumping down, she took a picture of the pumpkin, then smiled happily. Okay, no one will come, just treat it as our own holiday. Touching his nose, Jiang Hai smiled. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Daliana, Marian, and Little Ya all laughed. After everything was arranged, Jiang Hai and the others also returned to the villa. Because they have been really busy recently, Aphrodite and the others haven't come over for a while. Jiang Hai and the others just nestled on the sofa and watched TV casually. It is different from July 15th in China. Although it is also the Ghost Festival, no one will celebrate it on July 15th in China. At most, they will go to the cemetery or the crossroads to burn some paper, that's all. But in the United States, Halloween was still a popular holiday. Not only did people celebrate it, but there were also movies about ghosts on TV. Basically, all the TV stations today were showing movies or dramas about ghosts and monsters. This was also more appropriate for the occasion. Just like in China, there were always New Year's movies being played during the New Year. Jiang Hai didn't know much about American horror movies. He had only seen a few of them before. Alien, Resident Evil, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and so on. Especially A Nightmare on Elm Street, it was all because a long time ago, there was a popular novel writing style in China called infinite flow. It was very popular after it came out. Because of the trend, many people wrote about it. Only then did Jiang Hai notice the existence of A Nightmare on Elm Street. However, although Jiang Hai said that he was not afraid of anything, he was somewhat afraid of horror movies, so he nestled on the sofa and casually turned on the TV, hoping to see some movies that were not so scary. No one knows that Jiang Hai actually likes to watch comedies the most. This is also his hobby. But today the TV station didn't like him, so they didn't show any comedies. Most of them were horror movies. After watching one round, he actually saw a movie about long legs on a pay channel. This made Jiang Hai stunned for a moment, then he turned on the channel. This is a Wuxia movie? It looks like it has been released for a long time. Looking at the movie on the projection TV, Bernice said with some doubts while eating chocolate. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at her with contempt. Don't tell me you haven't seen this movie, it is quite popular. Pointing at the movie in front of him, Jiang Hai said very seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice blinked as if she really didn't know. I know this. This is a Chinese ghost story, this is Wang Zuxian. Although he is not young, he is really good looking. At this time, Xiaoya, who was sitting next to him, said with a smile. You weren't born in the United States, how can you not know this movie? Jiang Hai made a gesture to Xiaoya, then said to Bernice. This movie was very popular in China. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't know the box office, but the number of times it was replayed on TV was quite a lot. There were a total of 3 movies. To be honest, the first one was not very good and the second one was too bloody. The best part was the third one. The male lead was changed from Zhang Guorong to Liang Chaowei, and the female lead was still the super invincible long-legged Wang Zuxian, and Li Lianjie's current wife, Li Ji, was also in the movie, showing her very scary cleavage and also attracting attention with her long legs. To be honest, this third movie was very good and it was always replayed on TV. The combination of Liang Chaowei and Zhang Xueyo was also very funny. This movie was more funny than Ghost movie. I didn't want to watch movies when I was young. Bernice rolled her eyes at Jiang Hai, then sat there and watched. Jiang Hai didn't say much after hearing her words, so he also sat there and watched. The movie just started and Jiang Hai was also very happy to watch it. The most important thing is that this movie is dubbed in Mandarin, which is the version that Jiang Hai is most familiar with. Although there are English subtitles below, Delina and Marion are not so happy to watch it. Just as Shifang in the movie turned into a golden Buddha and killed the Black Mountain Demon, the whole movie officially came to an end. But at this moment, Jiang Hai's doorbell suddenly rang, and the 5 people on the sofa were startled. Who is it at this time? Looking at the watch, it was almost 9 o'clock. Shouldn't the children be asleep at this time? Why is someone ringing Jiang Hai's doorbell? Although he was startled, Jiang Hai quickly calmed down, then walked to the door and turned on the video. Don't give me candy or make trouble. Do you think the parents in town will allow children to walk more than an hour to you at night to ask for candy? Rolling his eyes at Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but say to him. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai touched the back of his head embarrassedly. This was also why he thought that no one would come tonight. It is indeed too far. He glanced around his manor. It was dark and it was indeed not safe. Too far is one thing. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace nodded, then shook his head and continued, another thing is that you haven't really integrated into Winthrop yet. Looking at Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was a little puzzled. You have indeed made a great contribution to Winthrop, but I can be sure that you know less than 20 people in Winthrop. You should know that our town has thousands of people. Looking at Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace said very seriously. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai calculated for a moment. It seems that, probably, maybe it's really close. In addition to his own employees, he knows 20 people. Chapter 619. It seems that there aren't even 20 of them. Muttering in his heart, Jiang Hai touched his nose and said apologetically. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also shook his head with a smile. This Jiang Hai is really casual. Although the previous incident has been resolved, you're only treating the symptoms and not the root cause. If you really want the townsfolk to not be afraid of you but to truly support you in the future, then you need to integrate with them. Mayor Wallace said with a serious face as he took out a cigarette from his pocket and put it in his mouth. Integrate with them? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai frowned and touched his chin. To be honest, he had been a bit of a hermit these years. He didn't know how to integrate with these people. He didn't have many friends over the years. Now that he had to step forward and integrate with these townspeople, it was really not an easy thing for Jiang Hai. Now that he heard Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai was a bit hesitant. You have to rely on yourself. Seeing that Jiang Hai really listened to his words and was thinking about it, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but nod with satisfaction. To be honest, if Jiang Hai wasn't a citizen of Wuxia, he would have wanted to pass the position of mayor to Jiang Hai. Because of Jiang Hai's identity, he had more authority in the town than he did. But now, even if he couldn't pass the position of mayor to Jiang Hai, he didn't want to be a scapegoat between Jiang Hai and the townspeople. He needed to make Jiang Hai and the townspeople harmonious. Compared to reforming thousands of townspeople, it was easier to let Jiang Hai take a step forward. I really don't know how to integrate. After thinking for a few minutes, Jiang Hai sighed helplessly. In fact, from the composition of his friends, it could be seen that he didn't have any friends in society. His friends were either childhood friends or classmates. He didn't really have any friends in society. He didn't even have any friends from university, although he went to university for 4 years. So now Jiang Hai, to put it bluntly, he didn't know how to make friends with adults. Of course, he might know more about the other type of friends, but that was only for women, that was all. Mr. Jiang, if you really want to integrate into the town, maybe you can try to attend some gatherings. Looking at Jiang Hai's confused look, the black guy over there hesitated and said to Jiang Hai. This black guy was called Hodge Searcy. He was only 24 years old, but he was quite famous in the town. It was because he opened a machine parts recycling factory. It was similar to the waste collection factories in China, but they only collected machine parts. For example, the tractor in Jiang Hai's manor was used for a year, so some parts were rusty. These rusty parts could easily break if they were used again, which was very dangerous. In the past, Robbins Garcia would take these parts off, then beat the rust off and continue to use them for a few years, but it was dangerous. So after Jiang Hai had this manor, the only thing he could do was to replace all the rusty parts with new ones. Agricultural machines were quite dirty in a year, so the parts were also very worn out. Not long ago, before buying the cattle, all the machines in Jiang Hai's manor had just been replaced with new parts. If all the parts were replaced with new ones, then the old ones would be troublesome. It was not allowed to be thrown away in the United States. Things like computers and TVs were not allowed to be thrown away in the United States. If you didn't use them, you would have to send them to a recycling factory, and then you would have to pay to destroy them. It was the same for these things, so there were many second-hand goods in the United States. There were also people who bought these old parts, such as Haj Searcy. After he bought these parts and beat the rust off, they could still be used. He could sell them to others, unlike Jiang Hai, who was a rich manor owner. The iron that could not be used could also be melted and sold back to the steel factories for secondary use. He only made a small profit in the middle, but even so, he could still make about $100,000 a year. And because many people needed him, he was quite popular in the town. The reason he was here today was mainly because of his son, who was a little black guy in the group of kids. That day when Jiang Hai was buying candy, he was discovered by these little guys. In fact, these little guys had been waiting to ask Jiang Hai for candy. Every year, these kids would be followed by an adult to prevent them from asking for something they shouldn't. This year it was Cersei's turn. However, as he watched the children finish off the people in the town, the children walked out of the town and wanted to ask Jiang Hai for candy. However, they were stopped by Cersei because in his impression, Jiang Hai was not easy to get along with. However, the children said that they had made an appointment with Jiang Hai and wanted to come over to ask for candy, which made him a little confused. Fortunately, at this time they met Mayor Wallace, who was returning home from work. After knowing that Jiang Hai's character was actually not bad, they brought the children together. As a result, when they first met, he found that Jiang Hai's character seemed to be really good. A party? Those bars? Hearing Cersei's words, Jiang Hai was a little puzzled. He didn't like to go to those bars. You can say that Americans like to have bars very much, and these bars are the best place to make friends. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cersei also said with a smile. But bars are very noisy, I don't like to go to noisy places. Seeing Cersei's praise for bars, Jiang Hai frowned. To be honest, he didn't like to go to nightclubs, bars, or bars. He thought it was too noisy. Oh, Mr. Jiang, the party we hold won't be too noisy. After all, it's held in someone else's house. No one wants to have their house renovated after they leave. We're not those high school kids who will turn the house upside down. Cersei shrugged. In fact, in the United States, there are many kinds of bars, all kinds of bars. It's just that Jiang Hai was mistaken by what others said before. Just like Cersei said, no one wants to turn the house upside down when they hold a party at home. After all, they still have to live in the house after they leave. If it's not very noisy and it's just a heart-to-heart talk with the neighbors, I'm quite willing to give it a try. Hearing Cersei's words, Jiang Hai's eyes lit up. If it's just to meet some strangers, Jiang Hai doesn't mind. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also nodded. It's naturally best that Jiang Hai thinks this way. If Mr. Jiang wants to go, there's a charity party tomorrow at Old George's place. Mr. Jiang can go and have some fun. Cersei was also a little excited when he heard that Jiang Hai seemed to be interested in going. After all, although he was only 24 years old, he already had a 4-year-old son. He was much more mature than the average 24-year-old college student. He knew that making friends with a rich man like Jiang Hai would only bring him benefits and no harm, especially when this man was in control of the town's economy. Therefore, he immediately recommended Jiang Hai with all his might. Charity party? Hearing Cersei's words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. What does this party mean? Is it to donate money? In the United States, a lot of people like to hold charity parties. However, it's not a collection of donations but an auction. The host and guests will take out some small things that are not very valuable to auction. After the auction, the money can be taken away by themselves, or donated to charity organizations in their own name. Of course, people who buy things directly without auctioning them are the most popular. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little confused, Mayor Wallace also explained to Jiang Hai. In the United States, people really like to donate money. Firstly, it's the most direct way to gain a good reputation. Secondly, it's also because of the United States political policy. Donating money can be used to offset taxes. Of course, the amount is limited. Otherwise, the country won't have the money to pay salaries. The most important thing is that the tax rate for donating money is at least 1 to 1%. Sometimes it's 1 to 1, 2 1 to 1, 5 or even 1 to 2%. This way, the people who donate money can save a lot of money. Not only can they gain a good reputation, but they can also earn money. There's nothing better than this. Therefore, the rich people in the United States are very enthusiastic about donating money. Of course, the charity auction held by Old George is definitely selling some small things. The final transaction price is about a few $1,000s. They just want to show their sincerity. However, this matter made Jiang Hai very interested. After listening to Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai understood the meaning of this charity auction. He can't do other things, but he's still very interested in throwing money, especially when he can't pay much. Okay, I'll call old George later. I'll go tomorrow. He clapped his hands. Just like what Mayor Wallace said, if Jiang Hai doesn't integrate into the town, there will be some trouble. Anyway, he has nothing to do now, so it doesn't matter if he goes to take a look. Therefore he thought for a while and decided to go and take a look. He has nothing to do anyway. Great, Mr. Jiang, I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Hodge Searcy. This is my business card. See you tomorrow? Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed to participate, Hodge Searcy couldn't help but feel excited. Jiang Hai has decided to participate. He didn't need to think to know that when people see Jiang Hai tomorrow, they'll be confused. When asked who asked Jiang Hai to participate, he would say that it was him. Moreover, the most important thing was that Jiang Hai agreed to participate. Jiang Hai would surely remember that it was him who suggested that he participate. Okay, Mr. Searcy, see you tomorrow? Looking at the excited Hodge Searcy, Jiang Hai also smiled. How could he not know what this man was thinking? But Jiang Hai didn't mind. He was basking in his own glory. Anyway, he had nothing to lose. Chapter 620. You really don't want to go with me? Party, aren't you interested? Looking at the 4 women who were packing up for him, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Didn't they say that girls like to join in the fun? Why don't they like to join in the fun? I'm a researcher, that kind of place is not suitable for me. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice spoke first. I'd better not go, it feels uncomfortable to be stared at by others. Little Ya also said at this time. If we go, it's inevitable that some boys will come and surround us. It's annoying, after all, we are your daughters. Listening to Bernice and Little Ya's words, Daliana and Marian also looked at each other, then said to Jiang Hai. Okay. Hearing that the 4 of them didn't want to go, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little depressed. It seems that he is the only one going today. Well, aren't you going with a mission? Go early and come back early. Don't be a womanizer. After you go, have a good talk with them. Patting Jiang Hai's clothes, Bernice said to Jiang Hai as if she was the mistress of the house. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled helplessly. Do I look like a person who will fight? Okay, I'm leaving. Looking at the cash on him again, well, there are 3,000 yuan, which should be enough. Then Jiang Hai left the villa, got in his car, and went to old George's horse farm. Last night, Hodge Searcy told Jiang Hai about Jiang Hai's integration into this town. Jiang Hai went back and thought about it. In fact, there was nothing to think about. After all, he didn't need to pay anything. He didn't have anything to do recently, so it didn't matter if he went to the local party. So after they left, Jiang Hai went back and called old George and asked about tomorrow's party. When old George learned that Jiang Hai was coming, he was extremely excited. After all, it was Jiang Hai, a person who couldn't be invited. Immediately, Yuelong clapped his hands and invited Jiang Hai to come over. This matter was settled. Early this morning, after Jiang Hai got up, he went to the warehouse in the cowshed as usual to tie grass. Then he went back to take a shower and change clothes. After staying at home for half a day at noon and afternoon, he went out at 4 o'clock in the evening. Taking advantage of the sunset, Jiang Hai drove to old George's horse farm. Out of the gate of the manor, Jiang Hai opened the window on the highway. Although the temperature outside was a bit low, Jiang Hai enjoyed the cold wind. Compared to the air conditioner, he preferred the natural wind. Moreover, it wasn't unbearably cold now. If it was winter, then he wouldn't be so reckless. At this time, it was already November 1st. It was officially winter. Although it didn't snow, the temperature dropped quickly. At noon, when the sun was still up, it might be more than 10 degrees, but now that the sun was setting, the temperature was only about 5 or 6 degrees. Feeling the cold wind blowing around him, Jiang Hai also took a deep breath as he looked at the grassland and cornfields in the distance. Logically speaking, the corn should have been harvested last month, but that wasn't the case. The people who planted the corn would leave some corn in the field. The more mature the corn became, the harder it would become. Humans couldn't eat it anymore. Of course, the corn wasn't for humans to eat. They were prepared to harvest it before the snow, break it into pieces and feed it to the cows. Jiang Hai didn't plant corn in his manor, but it didn't mean that he didn't know about it. After driving for about 10 minutes, Jiang Hai had already arrived at old George's horse farm. At this time, there were many cars parked outside old George's horse farm. Most of them were pickup trucks and there were also some motorcycles and cars, but they were obviously not of high grade. As soon as Jiang Hai's car came, it attracted a lot of people's attention. especially those young people who were making a bonfire in the small courtyard of the horse farm at this time. This is Jiang Hai's car. Why is he here? Jiang Hai's car was still very famous in the town. At that time, many young people recognized that it was Jiang Hai's car. Especially the owner of the horse farm, Old George's daughter, Delia, ran out directly. "Hi Jiang Hai, why are you here?" When she ran out, she just saw Jiang Hai getting out of the car, so she asked excitedly, "Haha, am I not welcome?" Hearing Delia's words, Jiang Hai smiled and went forward to hug her, then said jokingly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia couldn't help but punch Jiang Hai coquettishly. "This guy is really something. I called your dad last night and said that there was a charity here, so I came to take a look." After just a light hug, Jiang Hai let go of his hand and then said to Delia with a smile. Hearing that Jiang Hai and her father had already talked on the phone, Delia couldn't help but blame her father. He didn't even tell her that Jiang Hai was coming, really? Cough Delia, this is. Just as Jiang Hai and Delia were talking here, a white young man came over and looked at Jiang Hai and asked with some doubts. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked up at him. Jiang Hai was not familiar with this white young man, and he didn't know him. It was very likely that he was from outside the town, and from the way he looked at him, he should have a special relationship with Delia. "Let me introduce you. This is Jiang Hai. The Soaring Dragon Manor in the west is his. It's a big guy. This is Baveda Jindaro, my boyfriend." Seeing the two meet, Delia introduced with a smile. "Hello." Hearing Delia's words, Jiang Hai also stretched out his hand and shook the man's hand. However, Jiang Hai could see that when this person heard that he was just a farmer, there was some pride in his eyes. In fact, this was also a kind of human inferiority. Whether it was in the country or abroad, it was inevitable for people in the city to look down on people in the countryside. Even if the people in the countryside were rich, in the eyes of some people in the city, they would feel that they were superior. At this time, Jiang Hai was an out-and-out countryman in the eyes of this man. As for the Soaring Dragon Manor and the big guy that Delia mentioned, he directly ignored it. No one knew where his confidence came from. "Nice to meet you, Delia. I'm going to greet Ben and the others." After shaking hands with Jiang Hai, this Baveda Jindaro, who was still a little nervous, relaxed. After smiling, he said something to Delia, then walked into the open space at the horse farm and gathered with some young people who were obviously dressed differently from the people in town. Baveda works in Boston as a securities trader, commonly known as a trader. Seeing that her boyfriend didn't seem to give Jiang Hai any face, this made Delia a little embarrassed and said to Jiang Hai, "Oh, no wonder." Hearing Delia's explanation, Jiang Hai also chuckled. A trader and a bank employee. It could be said that these were the two most arrogant professions in the world. It was not because of how much money they made, but because they had seen too much money. Because they had seen too much money, they had no concept of money. Even if the money they saw was not theirs, they would have the illusion that they were superior to others. In China, whether it exists or not, has become a commentary of this profession. Jiang Hai was very familiar with this in the past. "Come in, my dad and the others are in the room, but I don't think you will like to chat with those old men." Delia saw that Jiang Hai didn't take this matter to heart, so she brought Jiang Hai into her home. But just as they walked in, a group of girls ran over and pulled away the reluctant Delia. Jiang Hai didn't care about this. He just walked in and looked at the layout of this small courtyard. There were a total of 2 venues in the house at this time. The young people were playing on the lawn outside, except for the bonfire in the middle. There were many long tables around the bonfire. There were a lot of food, fruit plates, roasted chicken wings, barbecued meat, beef, salads, and so on. Of course, there was no lack of alcohol. Large barrels of beer and other drinks were also placed on the table. Americans liked to drink cola, whether it was Pepsi or Coca-Cola, they liked to drink it very much. On the contrary, other drinks like Sprite didn't sell particularly well in the United States. At this time, there were also many such drinks on the long table. Because he drove here today, Jiang Hai didn't pick up the cold beer in the barrel that looked very good. Instead, he took a bottle of cola and drank it. While drinking, he observed the surroundings. Just like what Cersei had said, this party wasn't too noisy. Of course, it could also be because it hadn't officially started yet. Most of the people gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and chatted softly. But after Jiang Hai walked around, he was a little depressed to find that he didn't seem to know anyone here. Speaking of which, Jiang Hai didn't know many people in the town, and the people he knew were basically some old men. The only young people he was familiar with were Delia and Karma Cliff. But the problem was that Karma went to college and she wouldn't come back at this time, so Jiang Hai was a little lonely. After walking around here, Jiang Hai felt that he should go in and see old George and the others. He was familiar with these people. So after drinking the bottle of cola, he walked into the room of the horse ranch. As soon as he walked in, he saw a lot of middle-aged men and women. At this time they were gathered here and talking. Among them, Jiang Hai was most familiar with old George, Bob George and Hodge Cersei, who he had just met yesterday. When the two saw Jiang Hai come in, their faces showed surprise. As for the other people in the room, they were also shocked when they saw Jiang Hai come in, because they didn't know that Jiang Hai would come. Chapter 621. Hi Jiang, you're finally here. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, old George and Cersei both stood up immediately and took the initiative to greet him. As for the others, they also stood up immediately, even some gray-haired old people. From this, it could be seen that Jiang Hai's reputation in the town had reached a certain level. Take a seat, don't be so polite. Seeing that everyone stood up to greet him, Jiang Hai also smiled, then greeted old George and Cersei, and immediately asked everyone to sit down. Old George's wife had already prepared a chair for Jiang Hai and let him join these people, which made Jiang Hai feel a little flattered. Jiang, let me introduce you to everyone here. Seeing that everyone was seated, old George also smiled and said to Jiang Hai. After all, Jiang Hai was not particularly familiar with the others here except for him. Oh, Cersei is still okay. This is Hodge Cersei, I think you should also know him. This brat sold a lot of your parts to us, haha. This is Cotton Harris, also a rancher. The Straw Hat Flower Ranch to the east of you is his. Hearing old George's words, Jiang Hai also shook hands with Cotton Harris, who was sitting over there. Cotton Harris was a slightly old-fashioned white man in his 50s, and there was no smile on his face, but when he shook hands with Jiang Hai, he deliberately squeezed out a smile. Although it was not much better than crying, it was still a kind of kindness after all. Before Jiang Hai came, Cotton Harris was the biggest rancher here. Of course, the so-called big referred to the people in the West such as Texas or Montana. It was a super mini ranch. His ranch was a total of 2,700 acres, and Jiang Hai's ranch area was 9,200 acres, much smaller than Jiang Hai's ranch area. However, in this place his ranch was not small. With a total of 10,000 cows, it was indeed not small. However, the cows he raised were mainly for feed, not for grazing. He did not have that much grass to eat. This is Thackeray Eddy, also a rancher. After introducing Cotton Harris, old George introduced another rancher. This Thackeray Eddy's rancher was much smaller than Cotton Harris's rancher. His ranch was only 200 acres and he raised very few beef cows, mostly for his own consumption. He mainly raised dairy cows with a total of 500 dairy cows, and could be considered the town's largest milk supplier. This is Kerry Clark, also a rancher, but his ranch is further away from yours. Then old George introduced another white man, Kerry Clark. Rather than a rancher, he was more of a manor owner, because his ranch was not too big, only 150 acres. He did not raise too many cows, but he raised a lot of sheep and also planted a lot of vegetables. In the United States, vegetables were more expensive than meat, which was not rare, so it was normal to grow vegetables and sell them. After introducing the three white ranchers, old George introduced three more people, two black men and one white man. One of the two black men was J. Matthew, who also owned a horse ranch. He could be considered as old George's apprentice, and used to work in old George's ranch. Later on he became independent, but he often came back to buy horses. He mainly sold horses outside of Winthrop. After all, this was old George's territory. There was also Jermaine Lohnard, who was a used car dealer. He was a very fat black man and always had a smile on his face. He knew that with Jiang Hai's wealth, it was impossible for him to buy a used car, but since Jiang Hai no longer needed his car, he could sell it to him, so Jiang Hai could be considered a potential customer. The last white man was Base Bono, who was the owner of the small town's dairy factory. He mainly received milk from dairy farmers like Sac Eddy, then processed it and sold it to the small town, or to other places like Boston. Before Jiang Hai bought cows in his manor, he also bought his own milk and the quality was quite good. Of course, compared to Jiang Hai's milk now, it was a bit worse. After all, cows didn't just eat grass. After the introductions, everyone sat down again, and old George began to talk about the topic that he didn't finish before. Jiang Hai listened for a while, and to be honest, after listening for 5 minutes he couldn't bear it anymore because most of what old George and the others talked about was related to their politics, but it had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. For example, how many cents the price of ordinary beef had dropped, how much more expensive pasture was to buy, how much more expensive seeds were to buy, how much more expensive those Wall Street vampires should go to hell, and so on. There were also some American politics and so on. For example, it was getting harder and harder to get a ranch loan. In the past, they could apply for 50,000, 100,000, but now, even 10,000 was a problem. They were now thinking about whether they should go to Boston's town hall to protest and put pressure on the government. To be honest, these things had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. First, he didn't buy pasture, and the pasture in his manor wouldn't run out no matter how much he ate. Second, he didn't care about the price of beef because his beef was so popular, who would dare to lower the price? Third, he didn't need the subsidies and support from the government. His subsidies were just some tax breaks. Apply for a loan? Does Jiang Hai need it? So, although these things were closely related to everyone here, they had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. So after listening for half an hour, Jiang Hai resisted the urge to sleep and left with the excuse that he needed to go to the washroom. Out of the horse ranch house, Jiang Hai couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. After getting another bottle of Coke, he found a corner and sat there with a chair. He looked at the busy people in front of him and drank the Coke in his hand. "Hey handsome, can I get to know you?" But at this moment, a girl suddenly came over with a bottle of beer and looked at Jiang Hai with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also glanced at her. This girl should be a college student about 20 years old. She was white with reddish-brown hair, and her figure was quite plump. After all, she was still a college student. Her control of her figure was not so good, but she revealed a youthful aura. At this time she was looking at Jiang Hai curiously with a pair of big eyes, and Jiang Hai looked at her brown eyes and smiled. Of course Jiang Hai. Standing up, Jiang Hai stretched out his hand to the girl, and the girl deliberately shook Jiang Hai's hand. "My name is Kelly Solon, I know you, the owner of Soaring Dragon Manor." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl smiled and shook hands with Jiang Hai, then took a chair from the side and put it next to Jiang Hai, and said with a smile, "Wow, it seems that I'm quite famous." After taking a sip of Coke, Jiang Hai said with a smile, "Of course, you are the man who controls the lifeline of Winthrop, haha." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl named Kelly also laughed. It seems that Jiang Hai's speech that night was quite successful. "Are you also from Winthrop?" Shaking his head, Jiang Hai actually didn't want to make things too awkward with the townspeople, but sometimes if you don't give these people a good beating, they won't know the pain themselves. With a smile, Jiang Hai wisely changed the topic and looked at Kelly. He really wasn't familiar with Winthrop people. "Of course, our family should have lived in Winthrop for decades. After all, since my grandfather's generation, we have lived here until my death," Kelly said to Jiang Hai with a smile after hearing Jiang Hai's words. "Wow, that's really a long time. Looking at your young age, you should still be in university, right?" Hearing Kelly's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim, then asked her. "Yeah, I'm in the Department of Marine Engineering at Boston University, but I'm already in my senior year this year. I'm preparing for my graduation thesis, and my credits have already been fixed. Writing a thesis is not difficult, but finding a job is not easy." Kelly shrugged helplessly and said softly. Hearing this, Jiang Hai also wisely didn't continue. He just touched his nose and smiled. Is he going to say something? Is he going to help her find a job? Don't be ridiculous, Jiang Hai doesn't want anything to happen with her. Of course, if it's for free he would be quite happy. "I heard that you didn't come to these gatherings before. Why are you here today?" Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't continue with her words, Kelly didn't care. She chuckled and changed the topic. "Mayor Wallace said that I should communicate more with the townspeople and integrate into this group as soon as possible." With a shrug, Jiang Hai said helplessly. "Although this is a good thing in the current situation, it doesn't seem to be easy." Looking at Jiang Hai, Kelly thought for a moment and said seriously to Jiang Hai, "Americans like to attend parties. This is a good idea, but in addition to attending parties, you should also get along with these people." "Get along with them?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. How do I get along with them? He doesn't even know anyone. In this world, the easiest places to form friendships are in the military camp and school. Of course, it's impossible for you to be a soldier or a student, but the battlefield in peacetime is in the arena. Do you know any sports? Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled look, Kelly also smiled and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing Kelly's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but let out an "oh. I know how to play basketball." Thinking about it, he was quite good at basketball in the past. He could abuse professional players. Basketball? That might work, but I'm not too sure. As far as I know, the best sports to make friends are baseball and football. He rubbed his hair lightly. It seems that basketball in the United States really belongs to stepmothers. It's not popular. But as for baseball and football, Jiang Hai doesn't know how to play. This is also a problem. Chapter 622. In fact, if you want to integrate into the town, the most important thing is to have no gap with them. Don't let them always think that you are the one who controls the town's economy. You are different from them. When they no longer care about your skin color and your property, you are officially integrated with the town's residents. Ignoring Jiang Hai's puzzled gaze, Kelly Soren smiled and spoke. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod. He knew that the girl was right, but now that Jiang Hai wants to integrate here, he needs to consider a lot of things. After all, he has a net worth of billions. Although most of it is not known, he still needs to think about it. But I don't know how to play football or baseball. My understanding of these two sports is limited to the cartoons I've seen before. Shrugging, Jiang Hai said helplessly. Indeed, he didn't know much about these two sports. In fact, football and baseball are very easy. There are football and baseball teams in our town. I'm very familiar with their people. If you are interested in joining, I can recommend you to try. Looking at Jiang Hai, Kelly said with a smile. But listening to her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. It's better not to integrate sports into the story of the city. Even if it's football and baseball, Jiang Hai doesn't want anyone to say that he doesn't do his job. Well, it's a bit of a sloppy job. Hey Kelly, I was looking for you. You are here. Just as Jiang Hai and Kelly were chatting happily, a young man in his early 20s also came over. After looking at Jiang Hai with some vigilance, he said to Kelly Soren, "Hey Jack, what can I do for you?" But obviously, Kelly Sauron was not like a little girl who would take the initiative to leave. It was not easy for her to make friends with Jiang Hai. She would not leave so easily. Hearing Kelly Soren's words, the young man named Jack was speechless. It could be seen that this young man named Jack was interested in Kelly, but Kelly wasn't interested in him now. Well, I was going to ask you if you wanted a drink, but it seems like there's no need for that now. Jack shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly. He took one last look at Jiang Hai and walked back to the campfire. The man named Baveda Jindirat spoke, and his eyes drifted to Jiang Hai's side from time to time. Baveda is actually a good guy. He's witty, humorous, and earns a lot of money. His family background is also not bad. No wonder Delia was able to establish a relationship with him so quickly and even brought him home. Looking at Jack and Baveda in the distance, Kelly said this sentence unconsciously, but Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh when he heard it. In fact, he understood the meaning of the girl's words. If he didn't appear today, Kelly would probably be Jack's female companion. But to be honest, Jiang Hai was not interested in these girls. It didn't matter if it was just for fun, but if he got involved, it was not necessary because they were unlikely to tolerate Jiang Hai's nonsense. Jiang Hai's business was not small now. Naturally, he also needed a woman who could take care of the overall situation. Well, the party is about to start. Let's go. By the way, do you have an auction item? Looking at Kelly Soren in front of him, Jiang Hai looked at her curiously and asked. Kelly also chuckled when she heard Jiang Hai's words. I auctioned some flower seeds. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't care about what she said, Jiang Hai didn't know what Kelly was thinking, but her face didn't change. She just continued to speak with a smile. Don't donate the money later. Okay, let's go. Glancing at Kelly, Jiang Hai walked over with a smile. As they walked over, the party officially began. The parent-level existences in the room also came out and had a good meal around the campfire. Then it was time for the auction. Today's auctioneer was Delia, and the first item to be auctioned was her item. This item was a very delicate silver snuff bottle. In fact, it was given to her by a tourist from Wuxia. After all, Delia was quite good-looking. In the face of such a foreign woman, not everyone was as calm as still water, so some tourists would come to flirt with her. Of course, they didn't do anything excessive, but it didn't matter if they received some gifts in exchange for some gifts. After all, it was a pure silver snuff bottle, so the bidding price wasn't low at the beginning. $20 or $30 were constantly being bid. 50. Jiang Hai looked at it. He also had some interest in this little thing. After all, it was also something from his country and Jiang Hai could also benefit from it. But just as he finished bidding $50, Delia's boyfriend, Baveda Jindaro, bid $100. As soon as he saw him bid, Jiang Hai directly gave it to him. But when he learned that Jiang Hai had gotten the snuff bottle, this guy clearly looked at him with disdain, which made Jiang Hai a little unhappy. Does this guy think I'm easy to bully? Baveda is a good guy, but he's still too young. He just graduated from college not long ago. His family got someone to help him get into the securities center to be a trader. It's okay to have a friend, but he's still a long way off. Perhaps sensing Jiang Hai's dissatisfaction, old George, who was sitting next to him, couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also laughed. He understood what old George meant. He wanted Jiang Hai not to be angry with this guy. He wouldn't be angry with Jiang Hai, but it was inevitable that he would be unhappy. But he wouldn't directly fight back. Jiang Hai wasn't interested in the next few items. There was a blanket, a handmade saddle, an oil painting, and so on. Jiang Hai wasn't very interested in these things, so he just sat there and looked. We all know that Kelly's family is the largest flower plantation in the town. All the flowers in the town are planted by her family. These 100 seeds contain all kinds of flowers, and I can guarantee that every single one of them can be planted. To be honest, even I want some of them. Alright, the auction with no reserve price starts now. Just as Jiang Hai was sitting there and looking, the flower seeds that Kelly had mentioned to him were finally brought up. Although it was only a small packet, it could be seen that after Delia mentioned it, many women showed a look of yearning. There were very few women who didn't like flowers and sparkling things. However, compared to sparkling things, flowers were easier to come into contact with. Many women looked at their male companions on the spot. Their intentions were self-evident. $50. However, before anyone spoke, the first one to speak was Jack. It could be seen that he was deeply in love with Kelly, so it was natural for him to be the first one to call her. After calling her name, he looked at Kelly excitedly. As for the others, after hearing that the starting price was $50, most of them fell silent. 100 seeds were sold for $50, which meant that each seed was sold for 50 cents. That was a bit unacceptable for everyone. After all, it was already a bit of a loss to sell a flower for 50 cents, let alone a seed that might not even survive. $100. But unfortunately, in order to repay Kelly for her words, Jiang Hai didn't care about money, even though it was unlikely that anything would happen between Jiang Hai and her. He directly took out $100. $200. Jack, who originally thought that he had it in the bag, couldn't help but be stunned when he heard Jiang Hai's words. Then he glared at Jiang Hai and called out a number. $500. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai didn't care at all. With his net worth, a few $100? If it fell into the sea while he was out at sea, he might not even go into the sea to get it. He indeed didn't care about this little bit of money, but that didn't mean that others didn't care. Many people sucked in a cold breath when they heard Jiang Hai raise the price to $500. One had to know that the purchase rate of dollars in the United States was still very high. $500 could last a month. Although it was a bit tight, it was at least enough for food, drinks, rent, utilities, internet, and so on. When Jiang Hai called out $500, Jack's expression turned ugly. Many people looked at Kelly with the same expression in their eyes. You're in luck. In their eyes, Jiang Hai spent a lot of money to buy Kelly's things because Jiang Hai wanted to pursue her. But only Kelly knew that Jiang Hai was only paying for it. Seeing Kelly's look, Jack pulled Baveda over and whispered to him. After that, Jack called out a number. $650. I really like these seats. Please give me some face and let me have them. $650 was already the sum of all the cash he and Baveda had on them. But they knew that Jiang Hai was rich. If Jiang Hai didn't let them have the money now, they wouldn't have any more money to buy. Unfortunately, when he said that, the Winthrop townsfolk were amused. Now, everyone in Winthrop knew that Jiang Hai was famous for being amenable to persuasion but not coercion. If you asked him in private, he might stop, but if you threatened him so openly, it would be strange if he didn't. Sure enough, as soon as Jack finished speaking, Jiang Hai raised his hand again. He glanced at the group and couldn't help but chuckle. $1,000. Wow. As soon as Jiang Hai finished speaking, everyone present exclaimed. $1,000. A small auction like this might not even sell for $1,000 in the end. But Jiang Hai casually called out this price just to buy 100 flower seeds. It had to be said that ordinary people really didn't understand the world of the rich. As for Jack, when he heard Jiang Hai's words, he was already angry. He wanted to rush over but was stopped by Baveda. Chapter 623. Calm down, Jack, we're in Winthrop. Looking at Jiang Hai and the others in the distance, Baveda Jindirat whispered in Jack's ear. Hearing Baveda's words, Jack had to calm down. Jiang Hai was throwing money at the girl he liked in front of him. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't be able to bear it, okay? $1,500. Looking at Jack's eyes that were about to burst into flames, Jiang Hai smiled disdainfully. He actually raised the price by $500 when he offered $1,000. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, everyone looked at Jack with a hint of ridicule on their faces. Although they weren't familiar with Jiang Hai, they knew that Jiang Hai really didn't lack money. "You bastard." Jack couldn't help but roar when he heard Jiang Hai raise the price by $500 like a slap in the face. $2,000. Hearing Jack's roar, Jiang Hai stood up again and said smugly. He didn't know if it was the feeling of being a bad guy hidden in his genes that made him burn up again. He now really liked the feeling of slapping others in the face in front of them. He was a bad guy, come and hate him. Who the F***CK idiot? Seeing Jiang Hai raise the price to 2,000, the man's face became even uglier. After cursing a few times he turned and left. He knew that he wouldn't have a good ending if he had a conflict with Jiang Hai here. Instead of humiliating himself here, it was better to just leave. Therefore he didn't care about Baveta's pull and directly left George's horse farm. He rode his motorcycle outside and left. Watching him leave, Jiang Hai helplessly shrugged. "Okay, the final price is $2,000. These seeds belong to our Winthrop's richest man, Mr. Jiang Hai." Seeing that her only competitor had left, although she knew that he couldn't afford the price, Delia still waited for him to leave before announcing the birth of today's bidding king. After Delia gave the flower seed to Jiang Hai nodded and said, "Let's go." Jiang Hai also directly took out $2,000 in cash and handed it to Kelly Sauron next to him. When Kelly took the money, she deliberately scratched Jiang Hai's palm. Her meaning was obvious, but Jiang Hai didn't want anything to happen with her. So he just smiled, gave her the money and returned to his seat. Looking at Jiang Hai's performance, Kelly curled her lips a little helplessly. If it was an ordinary American, he would have left with her or taken her away. Jiang Hai didn't bring a female companion, but he was still so careful. Back in his seat, Jiang Hai leaned back and looked at the items that continued to be auctioned. "Hey Jiang Hai, your move is really good. Not only did you defeat your rival, but it seems that you also made Kelly completely fall in love with you." Serge walked over and sat next to Jiang Hai and whispered to him. Even though Cersei was a father, he was still quite young. He was only at the level of a university student. It's just that he didn't go to college. Instead, he used the money and time from college to open a parts factory. "Are you familiar with this Kelly?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai asked him strangely. "Of course, Kelly is a famous flower in our town. Her family also grows flowers. Haha, the largest flower shop in our town is opened by her family. Her family is also your tenant. After all, it's on the business street." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Serge also said to Jiang Hai, "Black people's personalities are two extremes. If he doesn't know you well, he doesn't like to talk to you, especially when he doesn't like you. But if he knows you well, then he is a chatterbox, and the speed of talking is not much slower than the speed of rapping." As soon as he heard Jiang Hai ask about Kelly, he started to talk non-stop. Jiang Hai also had a general understanding. Kelly was quite famous in the town. She was quite beautiful and her studies were good since she was a child. She was not a troublemaker. In high school she didn't mess around with men and women. In college she had a boyfriend, but the guy was 1 year older than her. They broke up after graduation. Now she was still in a relationship. And this Jack is Baveta's friend. Kelly is Delia's friend. They met through this pair. After that, Jack started to pursue Kelly. However, judging from the current situation, the effect wasn't very good. "By the way, I heard that you often play football games?" Listening to Serge's machine gun-like words, Jiang Hai immediately shouted stop and began to change the topic. "Of course, I am a member of our Winthrop football team. Although we Winthrop people don't have much money, our team is definitely in the top 3 in this area," Serge said with a smile when he heard Jiang Hai's words. "Americans really like to play baseball and football. There are 4 major leagues in North America: ice hockey, baseball, basketball, and football. However, ice hockey was more or less a limited sport. There was no ice in the South. If they wanted ice, they had to build their own ice rink in the stadium. If they played in this way, they would definitely have to spend money. After all, not everyone was willing to spend this money. Therefore, the expansion of ice hockey among the people is not very good. Basketball was originally a pure black sport. Although white people participate in it, they are still much less well known. And in the United States, after all, white people still have the final say. Basketball's position in the United States is more awkward. In the beginning, it was only better than ice hockey. Later, it might not even be able to maintain its position in the United States. Fortunately, David Stern decided to globalize and make the NBA of the world. Speaking of football, there were 5 major leagues in Europe which divided the viewing audience. Some like to watch the English Premier League, some like to watch Serie A, some like to watch La Liga, and so on. But when it came to basketball, there was only one international league in the world, the NBA. All the top players had to join this league, which was the highest level of competition. Because of this, although basketball is very famous in the United States now, there are not many people who really like it. Baseball is a sport for white people in the United States. There is no physical collision. Before the rise of football, baseball has always been the biggest league in the United States. When it began to decline, perhaps it was after the United States began to strictly investigate racial discrimination. Speaking of football, it is worthy of being the biggest sport in North America. This sport is very barbaric and makes people excited. Most importantly, black people and white people can have their own exclusive positions on the field. For example, black people, defensive linemen, running backs, and receivers were all positions that they could play. On the other hand, white people had a much higher chance of producing a top-notch quarterback. In addition, this sport was really a clash of muscles, so there were many people watching it. The community sports culture in the United States is very developed. Almost every community, every small town has its own many kinds of teams such as basketball, baseball, football, and so on. Then, the nearby cities or states will hold some competitions from time to time every year. There are also prizes. Not only can the teams show their faces, but they can also get some monetary rewards. So in the United States, sports for all people is not just a saying. When it comes to football, Serge is obviously more interested than Kelly. This is because he knows that Kelly will not like him, but he likes football very much. But to be honest, Jiang Hai does not know much about football. The only thing he has seen about football is a cartoon, Lightspeed Masked Man 21. This is a normal cartoon from Japan. It is very exciting to watch, but because of the audience, this cartoon that Jiang Hai thought was good did not become popular in China. The main character, Kobayakawa Ryona, can reach a speed of 4.2 seconds for 40 meters, 0.91 meters per yard. Later it evolved to 4.1 seconds, which is faster than the speed of light on the field. But for Jiang Hai is 4.1 seconds for 40 meters fast? If he runs with all his strength, he should be able to run 100 meters in less than 5 seconds. After all, the human body limit of 4 times is not a joke. However, Jiang Hai is just listening. The last time he played basketball, he almost collapsed. This time, it is better for him to be careful. After listening to Serge for a long time, Jiang Hai also listened for a long time, but he did not intend to try it. But he does not want to try it, but Serge wants him to see it. He can see that Jiang Hai does not know much about football, but in his opinion as a man, how can he not like football? This should not be the case. It just so happens that we have a friendly game the day after tomorrow against Chelsea, a city near Boston, not a football team, in Boston's XX Stadium. You can come and see it then. Seeing that Jiang Hai seems to be moved by his words, Serge could not help but say excitedly. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai also nodded. It does not matter if I go and see it. He has nothing to do anyway. After the time was agreed, the auction here was also over. In the end, a total of $4,270 were sold tonight. Of course, 2,000 of them were Jiang Hai's. The owner of this money can choose to donate the money or choose to take it away. Basically, anything worth $100 or $80 was donated, and anything worth a few $100s was taken away, especially Kelly's money. If she donated it, naturally, everyone would be very happy, but if she took it away, no one would say anything. After all, it was $2,000. In the end, she hugged Jiang Hai and wanted Jiang Hai to send her back. After failing, Kelly Solon pouted and left. Jiang Hai also drove back to his manor. Today was a good start. After returning, Jiang Hai told Bernice and the others that he was going to watch the football game the day after tomorrow, but they despised him because in their view, the football game was actually a very barbaric game. At least they did not like it. Chapter 6:24. Run this way and go around to catch the ball. When the catcher catches the ball, pay attention to the flanks and protect both sides. Looking at the people warming up on the field, Jiang Hai slowly walked to the stands next to him with a hint of expectation on his face. Jiang Hai really had nothing to do recently, so after tying the grass this morning, he went home to change his clothes, took a shower, and drove to Boston Stadium because he remembered Cersei said that they had a game against Chelsea today. Sure enough, as soon as he entered, he saw the people warming up. At this time the catchers were warming up. Rugby balls were bounced out, and a black Winthrop catcher was constantly jumping in the air and collecting the football in the air into his arms. He had to admit that Winthrop's rugby team had a lot of people, and many of them were people that Jiang Hai knew. Of course he was only familiar with them. In addition to Cersei, he also recognized the person who sold him the sea map at the Poseidon Festival. He was the defensive lineman and Cersei was the offensive lineman. In addition, there were some people that he was familiar with, but he did not know what they were for. Winthrop was not small, but there were not many people. It was a town with a total of only a little more than 1,000 people. Although Jianghai wasn't the same as when he first came here, when he saw a white person as a white person and a black person as a black person, and if he didn't look carefully he couldn't tell who was who. But now he still looked a little blurry. After glancing at Cersei and the others, Jianghai looked to the side and saw a group of girls dancing on the sidelines. What surprised Jianghai was that among these girls, Jianghai actually knew two of them. One was Delia and the other was Kelly Solon. At this time, these two girls were leading a dozen girls of different ages to dance there. The weather was indeed not warm and it was even a little cold. Wisps of white steam were coming out of the heads of these girls. It was obvious that they had been practicing for a long time. 1 2 3 4 2 2 3 4 3 2 3 4 4 2 3 4 Winthrop will win, Winthrop will win, Winthrop is the best. Listening to the girls' slogans, Jianghai slowly walked over. He had to admit that the Winthrop girls were quite good looking, probably because they lived by the sea. The Winthrop girls had good figures, tight and elastic. Especially today they were still wearing summer cheerleading uniforms. The top was a shirt that exposed the waist, and the bottom was a skirt. Although they were wearing safety pants and knee-length white stockings, it still looked very cold. It was only about a few degrees outside. Jianghai? Ladies, that's enough. Let's conserve our energy. We still have to cheer for our warriors later. Seeing Jianghai walk over, Kelly and Delia clapped their hands, signaling the girls who were still dancing to take a break. Hearing their words, the girls who were still dancing stopped. Then, without caring about the sweat on their bodies, they directly put on the jackets next to them, because they knew that they were not wearing much at this time. If they waited for a while before putting on their jackets they would catch a cold. They did not want to be cheerleaders for a small town's team and end up affecting their normal lives. That would not be worth it, especially in the United States where a cold was not a minor illness. That was because the United States did not sell the cold medicine from China. Cold medicine actually had side effects. While killing germs, it would also kill white blood cells. In the past, the cold medicine from China contained an ingredient called cough. Alright, I can't say it, but this ingredient, after being refined, could be made into a unique product. Therefore, generally speaking, the cold medicine from China was not allowed to enter the market. And foreign countries did not produce their own cold medicine, so if you caught a cold, the hospital would only give you a bunch of vitamins and let you go home to take them. Then, force yourself to endure and use your own immune system to cure the cold. If it was really too serious and you had a high fever that made you unconscious, then you would be directly taken to the hospital to be hospitalized for an IV drip. Therefore, in the United States, a cold was really not a comfortable illness, so most people paid attention to this point. Jiang, why are you here? After putting on their jackets again, Delia and Kelly ran over with a smile. I heard from Cersei that there is a game today. I have nothing to do, so I came to take a look. Looking at the two girls in front of him, Jianghai said with a smile. He naturally knew that these two girls did not have good intentions towards him. They were quite interested in him. No, it should be said that they were interested in his money. But they were all from the same town, so Jianghai did not want to have a falling out with the residents of the town. If that happened, it would be very awkward. He wanted to have some relations with Aphrodite and the others, even though Jianghai had been arguing that rabbits did not eat the grass near their burrows. But if Jianghai was a little tougher, then it would at most be a little awkward when Aphrodite and his women met in the future. That was all. But if old George or Kelly Solon's father blocked the door with a gun, then it would be awkward. So even if he knew that as long as he waved his hand the two girls would follow him, he still did not dare to do so. Yeah, we'll definitely teach those Chelsea people a lesson today. Come on, come and sit here. Hearing Jianghai's words, which were obviously distant, Delia could not help but curl her lips, but Kelly still said with a smile. Then the two girls took Jianghai to the front of the stands at the back. At this time there were already a lot of people sitting in the stands. Some of these people were the players' families, some were the townspeople who had nothing to do, and some were passers-by. In the United States, football was indeed a national sport. Many people liked it. When they saw a game, it was inevitable for them to come in and take a look. Among these people, Jianghai found a group of familiar kids. They were the children who had asked him for candy on Halloween. But unfortunately, these children were going crazy there at this time, and no one would pay attention to Jianghai. In the world of children, although money was important, it was not the most important thing. They knew that Jiang Hai was rich, but they did not care about the money, so they did not care about what was going on with Jiang Hai. Jiang, do you know about football? Sitting in the first row of the stands, Delia and Kelly did not care. They sat on the left and right of Jiang Hai. After all, they had just finished exercising. The two girls' bodies were exuding heat. When a woman smelled a man's sweat, she would feel that this person was very manly, and when a man smelled a woman's sweat, he would feel strange. Just as Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed, Delia asked Jiang Hai with a smile. Hearing their words, Jiang Hai nodded. I know a little about it. The field is divided into the offensive team and the defensive team, but that is professional. It is also divided into linebackers, receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, and so on. If you carry the ball to the area in front of the big fork, you will get 5 points and you can add a penalty kick. If you also touch the field, you will get 2 more points. If you kick the ball into the goal, you will get 1 point. If you choose to kick the ball under normal circumstances, you will get 3 points and there is no chance to add offense. Hearing Delia's question, Jiang Hai touched his nose and said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia could not help but be a little surprised. I thought you didn't know anything. On the other side, Kelly smiled and put her hand on Jiang Hai's arm and said with a smile. Seeing Kelly's action, Delia also took the initiative to move closer to Jiang Hai. Feeling the two girls getting closer and closer, Jiang Hai did not know what to do for a moment. Although Jiang Hai usually meant what he said, when it came to the matters between men and women, Jiang Hai was still very passive. It was clear from the number of times he was disobeyed. Our team is a team that combines running and passing. Cersei's speed and skills are very good. The catchers Tom and Carrie are very good. Their running positions are quite sharp. In Boston, the only teams that can compete with us are Boston, Chelsea, and Cambridge. But recently, Cambridge's main force moved to California, and they can't do it anymore. Currently they are in Massachusetts. It's us, Chelsea and Boston, the 3 powerhouses. Delia and Kelly did not care whether Jiang Hai was embarrassed or not. They wanted to sit directly in Jiang Hai's arms at this time. There was nothing wrong with sticking to Jiang Hai. While sticking to Jiang Hai, they also talked to Jiang Hai about the strength of Winthrop and the enemies of Winthrop. At this time, on the other side of the field, a group of people in blue and white came out of the tunnel. If nothing unexpected happened, those people should be the opponent of the Winthrop team today, Chelsea. Chelsea's security guards, go back to your hometown. As soon as they saw Chelsea come out, the stands on the other side of the field were naturally filled with thunderous cheers. But on the Winthrop side, the boos were deafening. Even Delia stood up and shouted at the team over there. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. This Chelsea team is famous for playing dirty on our side. Their boss and their quarterback are called Christianidis. He has a big casino in Chelsea. These players are the security guards he hired. It's not an exaggeration to say that they are notorious. Kelly also said to Jiang Hai when she saw the confusion in Jiang Hai's eyes. Well, they really don't look like good-for-nothings. He glanced at the people over there. Although they were far away, Jiang Hai's eyes were good. With a glance at the people over there, he knew that these people were not good-for-nothings. Although there was no murderous aura on them, which meant that they had no lives on their hands, their fierce aura was quite strong. If an average person encountered these guys, they would probably be shocked by their fierce aura. Of course, this was also a characteristic of being a security guard. No, it was not right to call them security guards because they should be thugs to be exact. Chapter 625. We'll be counting on you later. Winthrop's captain patted Cersei's shoulder as he looked at the Chelsea team. Cersei was in the spare parts business all year round, so he could not afford to hire anyone. Therefore he did all the loading and unloading of the car himself. Coupled with his black physique, he ran extremely fast and his body was abnormally strong. He could be said to be one of the best running backs in the Massachusetts Town League. There were not many non-professional players in Massachusetts who were better than him. The only one who could compete with him was the Boston team's running back. Cersei laughed when he heard the captain's words. After the two teams appeared on the stage, the game was about to start. Kelly and Delia, although they still wanted to stay by Jiang Hai's side, now that the game had started, they had no choice but to leave. After all, they were still cheerleaders. There will be a barbecue after the game. Let's go together. Kelly and Delia said to Jiang Hai before they left. For a game like theirs, regardless of whether they won or lost, there would be a party. If they lost, they would relax. If they won, they would naturally celebrate. Today's party was prepared early in the morning. It was a barbecue party in Cersei's factory. Holding a barbecue party with the smell of engine oil was really quite creative. Okay. Jiang Hai did not have anything to do today, so he smiled and said, okay. He would not be able to blend into the town and play with the old people. Rather than that, he would rather mix with the young people. Based on the current situation, the young people of Winthrop were quite kind to him. Delia and Kelly laughed when they heard Jiang Hai agree. Then they looked at each other. In a position where Jiang Hai could not see, there were sparks in their eyes from time to time. Regardless of what the two women thought, the match officially began after the two teams finished their warm-up. After the coin toss, the first team to attack was Chelsea. On the other side, Winthrop's team kicked the ball directly to the midfield with a big kick. The Chelsea team's receiver instantly caught the football and ran over. However, before he could run 20 yards, he was pushed to the ground by the Winthrop team's linebacker who rushed over. Bang! Both of their bodies fell on the lawn. Jiang Hai felt the pain in his body when he heard it. Although these people were wearing helmets and protective gear, after all, this was not a professional competition, so the protective gear was not too tight, and the defense was very ordinary. It was somewhat like the protective gear worn by children when they first learned to roller skate, but with the addition of a battle suit like the one worn by the Saiyans in Dragon Ball when Vegeta and others first came to Earth. It was used to protect the torso. But even so, Jiang Hai looked at the two people who fell and felt pain for them. However, it was nothing to them. Although they pushed the man down, the receiver firmly controlled the ball in his arms. They were going to attack from here, and the ball was also theirs. At the referee's signal, the two teams began to line up. A group of the strongest Americans lined up at the front. These people were the team's wall. They were the linebackers. Behind the linebackers was the quarterback. On the left and right stood the receivers and running forwards. With the referee's whistle, the Chelsea quarterback also began to shout, "Hart, Hart, Hart, Hart." The Chelsea players did not move at first, but when Hart shouted for the third time, the linebacker in the middle instantly threw the football in front of him over his crotch and into the hands of the quarterback. The game began at that moment. On the other side, Winthrop's players also pounced on the opponent at the first moment. The defensive lineman blocked the defensive lineman, and the two interceptors instantly bypassed the human wall and headed towards the opponent's 4-point line. However, the opponent's quarterback had already passed the ball to their running backs. Their forward used one hand to protect the ball while his other hand instantly pressed down on the helmet of a tackler who was rushing over. The tackler fell to the ground. Then he jumped over the tackler and sprinted in the direction of the goal. Hiss-oh! Looking at the man who fell there and was about to overturn the soil, Jiang Hai also grinned. But although it felt a little cruel, Jiang Hai's eyes could not leave the field in front of him. He now understood why no country other than the United States and Australia had introduced this sport. It was really too cruel. Jiang Hai had only heard of rugby before, but he had not played it in China. He had not even watched a game. He only heard that there was a type of rugby in China that was learned from Europe. It was called the waist flag rugby. Pulling the flag at the waist was considered to have stopped the opponent. It was not as cruel as it was now. He had to admit that there was actually a tyrannical factor in the human body, especially when watching a game like this. Although Chelsea's running forward killed the interceptor, he did not run too far. After running for 5 or 6 yards, he was stopped by a big white man on Winthrop's side with a grappling move. Jiang Hai had some impression of this white man. He did not know his name, but he knew that he was a fisherman. He had a fishing boat at home. Jiang Hai had seen him when he chose the fishing boat to take tourists to play. This guy was 195 meters tall. He was fast and strong. After all, he was a fisherman. His fishing boat did not have an automatic net reel. It had to be turned by hand. Even if there were pulleys, that thing was not an ordinary kind of hard. Therefore, he trained this guy to have a strong physique. In an instant, he approached the running back and directly grabbed him. Just like a shoulder bump in wrestling, he directly knocked the guy back more than a meter. The football also fell to the ground powerlessly. The rugby ball touched the ground and the attack failed. If it did not touch the ground, both sides could continue to attack if it was snatched. But if it touched the ground, the attack failed. But Chelsea did not care because they had 4 opportunities to attack. Knock him down. When the two sides rearranged the formation, Jiang Hai was also infected by the atmosphere at the scene. He had to admit that rugby was indeed a sport that could make people's hormones soar rapidly. In the beginning, when he watched the slam dunk master, he did not care too much. But after Kuriko's basketball came out, it was simply a fantasy instead of a sports competition. After all, it could cover the entire field with a 100% three-point field goal percentage. absolute defense within the three-point line, the ability to imitate the opponent's movements in an instant, the ability to use all postures to put the ball into the basket, the ability to dribble the ball forward and say, "You will make way for me." The opposing player would fall down by himself. If these things appeared in reality, well, there was nothing to see in the NBA. Although the speed of Light Masked Man was not as bad as Kuriko's basketball, it was also a little exaggerated. But with just a little understanding of the cartoon, Jiang Hai had a smattering of knowledge about the game on the field. He had to admit that it was really interesting. It even gave him the urge to go back and watch the NFL. However, he was only going to take a look. He wasn't too willing to participate in it because the gap between them was too big. Soon the first half of the game ended amidst the cheers of Jiang Hai and the others. Winthrop's side led the opponent 12-9 with Cecil's 2 touchdowns. The opponent scored a touchdown, hit an extra kick and scored 3 points with another kick. "Hey Jiang, you're here. Watch how we slaughter these Chelsea guys." When she came back to rest, Serge saw Jiang Hai sitting in the first row at a glance, so she spoke with a smile. "I'm waiting for you to win. If you win, I'll pay for the drinks later." Looking at Serge, Jiang Hai also gave a thumbs up and said with a serious face. When she heard that Jiang Hai was paying for the drinks, Serge knew that he was going to celebrate with them. She laughed loudly. When the others learned that Jiang Hai was paying for the drinks and that he was going to celebrate with them, they also shouted that it was a good thing. Originally, when they went to Serge's place, the drinks they drank were just beer or some low-grade wine. After all, they were not rich people. But since Jiang Hai said that he was paying for the drinks, it proved that the drinks later would definitely be much better than they imagined. This time they were even more excited. "What's the commotion over there?" Looking at the Winthrop people in the distance, the Chelsea quarterback on the other side, who was also the owner of the team, could not help but ask with some doubts. "I heard that the richest man in Winthrop is here and said that he wants to treat them to a drink." Hearing the boss's words, a younger brother next to him could not help but come over and speak to him. Hearing his words, Kristen Adis could not help but raise his eyebrows. The richest man? That Wuxia Jiang. Looking into the distance, he vaguely saw the yellow-skinned guy in the crowd. Jiang Hai's reputation was not only in Winthrop, but also in Boston. After all, this was an out-and-out billionaire. Being on good terms with such a person was beneficial to Kristen. After all, he was the owner of a casino. If he relied on those poor people to play, he wouldn't be able to make much money. At this time, he looked at Jiang Hai as if he was looking at a fat sheep. Of course, was Jiang Hai a fat sheep? The 10-minute break quickly passed. Winthrop and Chelsea came to the field again and the game continued. Chapter 6:26. Victory. With the last ball, Winthrop's kicker kicked the ball into the opponent's half of the field and ran behind him. After finishing the last minute, Winthrop's side also shouted loudly. Jiang Hai could not help but jump up and wave his fist vigorously. Compared to Winthrop's side, Chelsea's stands on the other side were far less lively. "Great play." Jiang Hai shouted loudly to the crowd on the field with his hands by his mouth. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cersei and the others did not forget to wave at Jiang Hai while celebrating. The duration of a football game was actually very short. Of course, it was longer than a football game. Although it looked like it was only 80 minutes, the first half was 40 minutes and the second half was 40 minutes. But with the addition of the 10 minutes for changing players and timeouts, it was indeed longer than a football game. Of course, this referred to the situation where there was no overtime and injury stoppage time. The game that seemed short but actually lasted for a long time was basketball. For example, in the NBA, it looked like the duration of a game was only 48 minutes, but it was divided into 4 sections. The two teams could call for a lot of stoppages. In addition to the official timeouts, it was not uncommon for a game to last for 2.5 hours. As for today's football game, although it wasn't an NFL game, it still lasted for about 2 hours. In the end, Winthrop won the game 37-30. The hero of the game was naturally Cersei. This guy scored 5 touchdowns and was the biggest contributor to today's victory. At the end of the game, Winthrop's people had already carried him up. And he also sat on everyone's shoulders, waving his arms vigorously. This victory was indeed very good. As for Chelsea's side, they were a little depressed. Indeed, the people on the Chelsea team were more aggressive. After all, they were all hired thugs. Oh no, they were hired as security guards. Their ferocity might be useful against those professional football players, but it was useless against some fishermen who relied on the sea for their livelihood all day long. Speaking of aggressiveness, these fishermen were much more valiant than them. After all, when they encountered other fishing boats overseas, conflict was inevitable. At least they were not afraid and dared to have physical contact. Their skills were better than the security guards, so it was inevitable that they would win the competition. In a while we'll go to Old Tony's to buy some wine. What do you want to drink? It's my treat today. Jiang Hai clapped his hands and said loudly as he looked at the people walking towards him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, these people burst into even louder cheers. After celebrating for about 10 minutes, Winthrop temporarily suppressed their mood because the Chelsea people had arrived. Of course they were not here to pick a fight. As a member of this regional league they were tough and dirty. But at the very least their boss could still afford to lose. They still cared about their reputation. Therefore they just came over to shake hands and say hello before leaving. Although some of the Winthrop players still had smiles on their faces, they did not ridicule the other party too much. After all, they were all from the neighboring town and would see each other often. There was no need to make things worse because of a competition. Moreover, they were not mortal enemies. You did a great job today. Congratulations. The Chelsea boss and captain shook hands with the Winthrop captain and said with a smile. Hearing what he said, the captain naturally smiled and replied with a few words. After a few simple greetings, the man walked to Jiang Hai's side. While he was sizing up Jiang Hai was also sizing up the guy. According to Delilah's introduction, the other team's captain was not simple. But it looked like there was no difference. This guy was about 1.78 meters tall, which was not considered tall in the United States. He looked to be in his 30s with a blonde buzz cut. His face had a sense of vicissitudes. He was not handsome, definitely not handsome. He could only be said to be very ordinary. But such an ordinary person had a great reputation around here. Of course this reputation was not very good. How could a gambler have a good reputation? Hello, my name is Kristen Adis. I run a casino in Chelsea. If you are interested you can come and play. After sizing up the other person's hand, Kristen Adis could not help but stretch out his hand and said to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai, nice to meet you, but I don't have much talent for gambling. Looking at his outstretched hand, Jiang Hai shook it and then said with a smile. Hearing that Jiang Hai had no intention of getting to know him, Kristen Adis did not care. After shrugging, he said goodbye to his teammates and left with his men. Jiang, this guy is not a good person. It's best not to get too close to him in the future. Looking at the leaving Kristen Adis, Serge came over and whispered to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled. In fact, needless to say, he also knew that this guy was not a good person. Well, let's forget about him, let's go celebrate. For Jiang Hai, it is impossible for him to take the initiative to gamble, so this person is probably just a passerby with him. Turning his head, Jiang Hai looked at the crowd behind him and said loudly, "Wow." As soon as they heard Jiang Hai say that he was going to celebrate, everyone naturally wouldn't be polite and shouted loudly. Then Jiang Hai and others drove together and left Boston. They first went to Old Tony's Cowboy Song Bar in Winthrop. There they moved a lot of beer and some good quality wine to Serge's house. At this time, Serge's house was already prepared. There were barbecue racks and cured meat. After ordering 10 large portions of pizza, the party officially began. In the warehouse mixed with engine oil, the young people were having a good time, drinking beer and eating barbecue, but there was no noisy music. There was originally music, but because Serge knew that Jiang Hai didn't like it, she cancelled it. However, although there was no music, the atmosphere at the scene was still quite lively. Jiang Hai took a large bottle of beer and a large plate of barbecue meat, then went to a corner to eat. Although he wanted to integrate into this town, he was not familiar with it. To be honest, he was still not familiar with this place. He was not very good at making friends with strangers. What are you doing here alone? However, at this time, Delia couldn't help but smile as she walked over. She held a bottle of cocktail in her hand and sat beside Jiang Hai. This kind of cocktail was actually a pre-mixed cocktail. It was still very popular in the country, like the famous Rueao. Jiang Hai had drunk it before, but this was the United States, while Rueao was from Japan. Here people preferred to drink Bacardi. Of course, this kind of cocktail was also sold in the country. The red and green color was very beautiful. The taste is also good and it is very popular with women, but Jiang Hai does not like to drink this kind of wine. He prefers to drink beer. I don't know anyone, so I'm here to fill my stomach first. Looking at Delia, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Are you full? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia smiled and looked at Jiang Hai, then asked. Almost, what's the matter? Jiang Hai sensed that the plate of meat was finished. It was impossible to say that he was full, but at the same time he wasn't that hungry. Looking at Delia in front of him, Jiang Hai curiously asked. If you are full, I will take you to see something. Delia finished speaking, stood up with a smile and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai was also a little curious. What is there to see? So after hesitating for a moment, he put down the beer glass and plate in his hand and followed Delia. Delia led Jiang Hai through the crowd without attracting anyone's attention. She led Jiang Hai straight to the second floor of the factory. But as soon as they came up, Jiang Hai was stunned. Because at the corner of the second floor, a man and a woman were kissing passionately. The man's upper body was already red, and the woman's coat had been thrown far away. The man's hands were also reaching into the woman's clothes. They should be warming up, it seems. After the two saw Jiang Hai coming, they did not care about Jiang Hai and were still kissing passionately. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai felt a bit guilty. The reason he followed Delia was because it was daytime. He didn't think that Delia would do anything to him during the day. It was precisely because of this that Jiang Hai was curious about the second reason. But now, it seemed like he had underestimated Delia. Jiang Hai was a bit surprised. But now, it seemed like he had underestimated Delia. Okay, let's do it here. I want to show you this. Just as Jiang Hai was hesitating whether to run or not, Delia suddenly stopped in front of him and pulled Jiang Hai into the bathroom on the second floor. Under Jiang Hai's gaze, she instantly lifted her top, and then two abnormally plump breasts appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, and then his eyes drifted elsewhere. Delia, it's not good for you to do this. You have a boyfriend and you know my situation. It's impossible between you and me. If something happens, I won't be able to explain it to old George. Feeling Delia's footsteps, Jiang Hai could not help but take a step back. Then he looked to the side and said seriously. Hey Jiang, I don't want to have any emotional disputes with you. I still love my new boyfriend very much, at least for now. I know you're not a good person, so I don't want to be your girlfriend. I'm just interested in you, so you don't need to feel burdened. If you want to fit in with us, you need to let go. Chapter 627. Cough, that's not right. Hearing Delia's words, Jiang Hai took another step back, his body even leaning against the door. It was the first time he had been so passive, and it was indeed somewhat baffling. I'm already 19 years old. I became an adult last year, so I don't need you to tell me what's right and what's wrong. Feel it? Don't you like it? Looking at Jiang Hai's old-fashioned appearance, Delia could not help but smile. She had heard before that Easterners were still very concerned about this thing and were not as open-minded as Westerners. Now it seemed that Jiang Hai was a very traditional young man. As she spoke, she had already taken a step forward and pulled Jiang Hai's hands with both hands, placing them on two places where they should not be placed. At the same time, her hands also placed on the things that Jiang Hai should not be placing on. Wow, this shape, it can't be. But as soon as her hands touched, Delia could not help but exclaim. Don't. Feeling Delia's movements, Jiang Hai immediately wanted to stop her, but unfortunately, Delia had already taken off Jiang Hai's pants. For the first time, Jiang Hai felt that wearing pants without a belt was not very good, but the instant chill made him understand that his existence had already been seen by Delia. Looking at the behemoth in front of her, Delia swallowed her saliva. Delia swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Then, without giving Jiang Hai a chance to resist, she knelt down and lowered her head. Hiss. Feeling that different feeling, Jiang Hai could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. And in his mind, the impulse brought about by the Dragon Balls was about to devour him. Jiang Hai was originally not a person who could not control himself, but ever since he had the Dragon Balls, his desire for more and more increased. His needs in this area were getting higher and higher, and he was getting less and less able to control himself. This might be the only side effect of the Dragon Balls. If Delia and Kelly had talked it over, then Jiang Hai might not have had any problems. Just like the day before yesterday, although they had made it clear and hinted so many times, Jiang Hai was still able to get away. But when the other party forced herself on him, Jiang Hai was stunned, and his rationality would be instantly swallowed by his desire. It was not until he turned into sage mode that his rationality returned. Of course he was sober at this time, but his desire was really too strong. It was the same this time. In less than 3 minutes, Delia found that Jiang Hai's waist began to move, which made her delighted. But after more than 10 minutes, Delia discovered that Jiang Hai didn't seem to have any intention of turning into sage mode. I can't, my mouth is so sore. After forcibly pushing Jiang Hai away, Delia half knelt on the ground and said to Jiang Hai somewhat pitifully. However, Jiang Hai did not recover, but his consciousness was still there, and he knew that she was telling the truth. And now it seemed to be a good time to start directly. Then Jiang Hai pulled her up, let her support her hands against the wall, and then removed the thing she could not describe, and then did it in one go. Wow, two inside, don't you wear a raincoat? Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Delia could not help but exclaim in a low voice, and then said with some worry, "Are you afraid of being sick?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. No one had ever said this to him before. That's not it. A rich person like you would definitely not let yourself be sick, but I'm afraid of having a baby. If I give birth to a yellow man in the future, how can I explain it? I have a boyfriend. Delia said softly as she glanced at Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai ignored her and began to move. Just get it outside in a while. Jiang Hai whispered to Delia as he continued to move. Looking at Jiang Hai, Delia whispered into Jiang Hai's ear, "Get it into my mouth, I like it." Next was the part that could not be described, although there were many parts above that could not be described. But when Jiang Hai did things, he always needed some impulse and passion, and these were the ones. Sometimes, people would feel that time passed very slowly, and sometimes it would feel that time passed very quickly. Just like when doing this kind of thing, time passed very quickly. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. When Jiang Hai resisted and came out Delia's mouth, when he thought of the key words, he also let out a long sigh and then sat weakly on the toilet next to him. As for Delia, she had already lost all her strength. After swallowing a mouthful, she wiped her face and the corner of her mouth with her hand, and then gently licked them clean. Then she sat on the ground, constantly panting. "Are you okay?" Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai asked softly. Now that he had returned to his saintly state, he felt that he had done something wrong. After all, Delia's father knew him and she was someone else's girlfriend. As for what other people would do if they encountered such a thing, Jiang Hai did not know, but he felt somewhat guilty. "It's okay, it's really great. It's the best experience I've ever had. Jiang Hai, you're really a perfect lover." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia raised her thumb and said with a look of approval. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also felt a little awkward. At this time, no matter how he replied, it seemed that it would be wrong. "Hey, Delia, how do you want me to say this? After all, you have a boyfriend and I know your father. I said before, I can't give you anything. Of course, if you want to buy something, you can look for me." Hearing Delia's words, Jiang Hai helplessly sighed. "What is this called? I'm also making money now. Ah, Jiang, I have to admit that you're really cute. I don't want anything when I do this with you. This is the United States and this is very normal. I want to integrate into our lives, so you need to try to understand us." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia could not help but smile. Then she slowly stood up and came to Jiang Hai's side, sitting directly on Jiang Hai's lap. At the same time, her pair of plump breasts pressed against Jiang Hai's chin. In America, it's normal for friends to occasionally do unspeakable things. Everyone needs to vent. Men need to do it and so do women. So, if you're not looking for someone with a clear goal, there's nothing wrong with it. That's why we still know how to restrain ourselves. When our father was young, in the 1980s, Americans were the most open-minded. I heard that hormones were everywhere at that time, and the relationships between men and women were so messy that it made one's hair stand on end. Even within the same family, it was quite common for cousins to have sex. Of course you couldn't have babies. Of course it's not possible to have children. Looking at Jiang Hai, Delia smiled and said, "Indeed, men and women in the United States did not pay much attention to these things. Many men and women had already done it when they were in junior high school. Of course, there was no junior high school in the United States. Junior high school and high school were connected. There were also schools that were connected to junior high school, and elementary school. But at that time, exploration of the opposite sex was not rare in the United States. On the contrary, there were not many people in the United States who had psychological burdens like Jiang Hai. Of course, those with ulterior motives were different." Hearing Delia's words, Jiang Hai could not help but be speechless. What kind of fallacy is this? Messing around with men and women became an important node for me to integrate into this small town? It's too much of a joke. Okay, don't feel burdened. Let me hug you for a while. I'm really tired and I don't want to leave you. Feeling that Jiang Hai's mood might be a little better, Delia also hugged Jiang Hai's head and said with a smile, "Kaka." At this moment, there was suddenly the sound of a key turning outside the bathroom door. It startled Jiang Hai, but at this time there was nothing in the bathroom at all. What should he do? Before he could figure it out, the door had been opened. Then Kelly Soren's little face, which was a little red from wine, appeared outside the door. After seeing Jiang Hai and Delia inside, she could not help but glare at them bitterly. Then in a flash she entered the bathroom, locked the door behind her and walked quickly to the two. "Hey Delia, you already have a boyfriend. Why are you still clinging to Jiang Hai?" Grabbing Delia's arm, Kelly Soren directly pulled her up from Jiang Hai's body, then looked at her and said with a displeased expression, "Hey dear Kelly, we're just hugging each other for warmth. I'll help you try it. I have to tell you, Jiang Hai really has this. That's great." Looking at the angry Kelly, Delia chuckled and then gave Kelly a thumbs up. Of course she was talking about Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Kelly could not help but raise her eyebrows. She glanced at Jiang Hai's naked lower body and looked at Jiang Hai with some complaints. Then she sat on Jiang Hai's lap and took off her shirt in an instant. "Since you said you're helping me try it, then I'll try it myself." Looking at the dazed Jiang Hai in front of her, Kelly said fiercely. Then she pulled Jiang Hai's face with both hands and kissed him directly. Feeling Kelly's breath and the taste of alcohol in his mouth, Jiang Hai reacted. He was just about to push her away, but his hand was grabbed by Delia. "Of course my friend, I'm here to help you." Looking at Delia's smile, Jiang Hai felt that it would be difficult for him to escape unscathed. When Delia pressed Jiang Hai's hand on the two places on Kelly's body that could not be described, Jiang Hai felt that he seemed to be unable to control himself again. Perhaps, as they said, he wanted to integrate into the other party's world. First, he wanted the other party to have similar habits, and their habits toward Jiang Hai were obviously not so pure. But as a man, in the face of such habits, Jiang Hai could not say anything because he did not know who was taking advantage of him. Chapter 628. "You're back, why are you so late?" Seeing Jiang Hai walk in, Bernice, who was leaning on the sofa and eating blue plums, asked with some confusion. As she spoke, she stuffed a few more blue plums into her mouth. Her fingertips and mouth were bluish-purple as if she was poisoned, but Jiang Hai didn't have the time to make fun of her today. "Oh, I drank a little too much at noon, so I rested at his place." Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai smiled, walked to the sofa, then sat down directly, looked up at the light, and then slowly looked back at his big fish tank. "What's wrong? Haven't you recovered yet?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Bernice couldn't help but ask Jiang Hai with some confusion. No, I've recovered, but there are some... Well, I don't quite understand." Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai immediately raised his head and said with a chuckle. Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai was still a little flustered. He went to watch the game today, then went to Chelsea's place, and what he did there was no need to say. With Kelly joining the battle later, Jiang Hai and the others stayed in the bathroom upstairs for an entire afternoon. Fortunately, Chelsea's house has a total of 4 bathrooms, one upstairs, one downstairs, one in the warehouse and one in the reception room. Otherwise they would be suffocated. By the time Jiang Hai helped Kelly and Delia out, it was already past 6 o'clock in the evening. Most people had already left, and the owner, Chelsea, also drank too much and collapsed on the sofa. Jiang Hai didn't say much and helped the two leave. Of course, he only came back after sending them back to their respective homes. But even though he came back, Jiang Hai was still a little confused about what Kelly and Delia said this afternoon. "What do you not understand? Tell me." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice turned around and looked at Jiang Hai with some confusion. Looking at her, Jiang Hai also turned his head and looked at Bernice. He thought about it in his mind. Maybe if he talked to Bernice, she might give him an answer. "It's like this, I've been trying to integrate with the people in the town recently, but I found out today that I'm really different from the people in the town. I can tolerate other things, but the problem is that I can't accept fighting. It's like the Americans are very relaxed about fighting. They don't have much sense of moral betrayal, which makes me a little puzzled." Looking at Bernice, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. He didn't tell the complete truth, but she should be able to understand if he said it this way. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice's face suddenly turned red. She was still a young girl. She was still a little uncomfortable when Jiang Hai asked her such things, but she was asking for it. If she didn't answer, it didn't seem too good. So after a little hesitation, she explained to Jiang Hai. "Let's talk about education in America. Let's talk about the education in China and the United States. In the United States, there are 2 types of education. One is similar to the education you see today, a pure American education. They will teach the children about combat when they are very young to prevent any problems. But it is also because of this that the children in the United States are very curious about this aspect. When their physical conditions allow it, they may try it. Bernice thought for a moment and said hesitantly. As she said, education in this area was indeed very early in the United States, but it also developed into two extremes. One kind was the Catholic family. They were very strict about fighting because in their view, if one's body was impure or had an abortion, they would die without a burial place. Therefore, generally speaking, the Catholic family was very strict about this aspect. But most ordinary American families were very casual about the management in this area. They didn't care about their children knowing the other half when they were 13 or 14 years old. Of course, they had to be prepared for it. Although Catholicism was the world's largest religion, there were definitely not many people who didn't believe in it. This created the mainstream impression in the United States. Wuxia had always been very conservative in this area. They began to set up education in this area after high school, so the current environment in the country was very chaotic. But in fact, after graduating from high school, most of the boys and girls in the country had not fought before. At least 70% of them had not fought before. But in the United States, more than 80% of them had fought before. This was also one of the reasons why the media in the two countries criticized each other. The domestic media would say that the combat education in the West was earlier and more advanced. It could let the children know more, and this was beneficial for the children's development. On the other hand, the Western media would criticize their own government for introducing combat education too early. This would make the children develop a bad interest and curiosity in these things, and thus they would try it out. This was not beneficial to the children's development. Of course, both sides had their reasons. This was only the media's criticism. After all, foreign things could not be forced on a country. For example, if the same thing was used on Wuxia in the United States, Wuxia would probably be in chaos. Because people had too much power, they would become arrogant. Wuxia had never lacked ambitious people since ancient times, and it was hard to say whether they would use proper means to obtain the power they wanted. So Wuxia would be in chaos. And if the same thing was used on the United States in the Wuxia, the United States would also be in chaos. The Americans were used to freedom. If you suddenly asked them to pay for their own medical care, pension insurance and social welfare, and if they lost their jobs, they would have to find a job themselves. Every day they would have to work hard for a few square meters of house. They would definitely rebel. Therefore, different national conditions meant different natural environments. However, Jiang Hai was now a Wuxia citizen in the United States. Since he had to find a way to integrate into this country, it would be very troublesome. Otherwise, he would have to abandon the habits he had developed in the country all these years and integrate into the country like an American. But he was not willing to do so. He had some things on him that he would not throw away no matter what. But this collision of Eastern and Western cultures really made him feel a little overwhelmed. In the United States, this Western world, before a man and a woman were married, the restrictions on each other were not very strict. Things like delias were very common. After all, they did not get along with each other for the purpose of marriage. But in China, since a man and a woman had confirmed their relationship, if one of them cheated, it would be a big mistake. Who would play it down like this? Unless it was those white-collar workers who pursued a one-night stand or something like that. Otherwise, why would someone act like this? Jiang Hai was not a white-collar worker. He would not pursue a one-night stand or anything like that. He did not lack women. This kind of cultural shock really made him feel a little overwhelmed. That was why he asked Bernice. But after a long time, Bernice still could not explain it clearly. Because she did not really understand these things. Hey, after a long time, you still don't understand. In short, if you feel that there is a way to integrate into this group and you are willing to do it, then you can give it a try. For example, go to a party or watch their football game. These are also things that I want you to do. But if you have some doubts about some things, then you don't have to follow the American attitude. For example, this thing, understand? Seeing that Jiang Hai had listened to her for a long time and still had some confusion in his eyes, Bernice pursed her lips. In fact, she had already started scolding him in her heart. This Jiang Hai was really annoying. Did he not know that she was a big girl? How shy would she be if he asked her that? Although she was used to learning Chinese and Western culture, she was still a traditional Wuxia girl in her bones. After saying so much, she felt that she had already broken through her limits. But if she did not explain it clearly, she was afraid that Jiang Hai would mess around. So after saying that last sentence, Bernice stood up. She did not care about the pot of blue plum beside her and directly ran back to her room. She needed to digest it properly. If I'm willing to try, I can try. If I'm not willing to try, can I not try? This seems to work. Jiang Hai took out a few blue plums from the big bowl and threw them into his mouth. As he ate, he muttered softly. He felt that he wasn't himself this afternoon. This wasn't good news. Unknowingly, this was what Jiang Hai was thinking. He sat on the sofa and ate the blue plums while unconsciously watching the TV in front of him. Aphrodite and the others did not come over tonight. There was no one else in Jiang Hai's room, so he had a lot of time to think about some things. After an unknown amount of time, when the last blue plum was thrown into Jiang Hai's mouth, he could not help but shudder. After that, Jiang Hai felt a little strange. With his physical fitness, why would he shudder? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai could not help but look into the distance. In the end, he happened to see the living room's window flapping in the wind. Looking through the window, Jiang Hai's eyes could not help but brighten. He only saw that the large expanse of snowflakes had fallen from the sky at some point. The entire world had unknowingly changed into a white coat. Putting the bowl aside, Jiang Hai stood up and walked to the window. He glanced at the snow on the windowsill. It was almost 2 or 3 centimeters thick. Looking out again, it was pitch black. Not to mention stars, there was not even a moon tonight. Oh, it's snowing. And it looks like it won't be small. Looking at the pitch-black sky outside, Jiang Hai's face showed a smile for the first time since he returned home. He was still very familiar with such a scene. Because his hometown would also have such heavy snow at this time, but now his home was in Winthrop. Chapter 629. Boston was not very good at this point. It got cold too quickly. In fact, Boston's latitude was about 41 degrees, which was the same as the latitude of the imperial capital in China. But when it started to get cold here, it was almost the same as Jiang Hai's hometown, Bingqing. In many countries, the first snow actually had a lot of meaning, but for Jiang Hai, snow was just snow. It had no meaning. After seeing the snow last night, Jiang Hai closed all the windows and turned on the geothermal. But even so, he didn't sleep very well this night. After all, the windows had been open for a long time. When they were suddenly closed, he really felt a little suffocated. It was rare for Jiang Hai to wake up at 6 o'clock again. But at 6 o'clock in Boston, the sky had just begun to brighten. He opened the bedroom window to let some air in. As soon as the window was opened, the cold wind rushed in instantly. It was so cold that Jiang Hai couldn't help but shiver. The weapon under his crotch couldn't help but twitch. Hiss, it's really strong, but it seems that winter is here. Looking at the white expanse outside the snow, Jiang Hai couldn't help but whisper. Although he was a northerner, he obviously liked summer more than winter. Shrinking his neck, Jiang Hai went to the bathroom to wash up, then changed his clothes and went downstairs. He found that little Huang and Xiao Bai were a little lazy today, but Jiang Hai didn't care about them and opened the door directly. When the door opened, the cold wind poured into Jiang Hai's villa in an instant. At this time, little Huang, Xiao Bai and Qiuqiu, who were sleeping on the warm floor, reacted almost instantly. They looked at Jiang Hai with resentment. This guy is too annoying. After getting used to it, Jiang Hai simply stretched, exhaled a breath of white air, and prepared to go to the warehouse at the cowshed. Recently, he had to go to the warehouse every morning to help bale grass. Although he was the boss, he couldn't just do nothing, right? But before he left, he saw Robbins Garcia and the others coming out of the warehouse with some things. Hi, Robbins Garcia, aren't you bale grass today? Seeing them come over, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask with some doubts. Boss, where are we going to get grass? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia glanced around, then said helplessly. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai was also dumbfounded for a moment, then laughed self-deprecatingly. Yes, it's snowing everywhere, where are we going to find grass? Thinking of this, he felt a little awkward in the air. By the way, boss, let's help you clear the ground here first. Maybe he felt Jiang Hai's awkwardness as a qualified lackey. Robbins Garcia immediately changed the topic and said with a serious face. The snow is not very thick, there's no need to clear it. He raised his feet and looked. Although the snow last night was not light, it was not particularly heavy. After all, it was just the first snow. Although Jiang Hai did not eat fried chicken or drink beer, the snow was indeed not heavy. Now it looks like it's only 3 or 4 centimeters thick, which is far worse than last winter. It's because the snow is thin that we need to deal with it immediately because the weather is not that cold. Today's weather forecast said that it will be 13 degrees. The snow will turn into water at noon, and then it will freeze again at night before it dries. Robbins Garcia said to Jiang Hai when he heard Jiang Hai's words. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai also nodded. Indeed, after the snow turns into water, it will be troublesome when it freezes again. Jiang Hai also doesn't want his house to be so slippery, so he immediately agreed and picked up a broom to help. When it first snowed last year it was already the end of November and the first snow at that time was quite heavy. A broom was not very useful in that kind of snow, but now there is only a few centimeters of thin snow so a broom is the best thing. On the contrary, shovels and the like are not very effective. The grassland does not care whether there is snow or not, so Jiang Hai only needs to clear the road and the parking lot in front of the house. Today Edward Anderson and the others are not in a hurry to go to the dock. They all came to help. It is said that there is strength in numbers and this is really true. Jiang Hai and the others started sweeping at 6 o'clock, and they were all done by about 8 o'clock. Jiang Hai also deliberately drove the helicopter around the manor with Marlon Rupert. After making sure that there is no road left unswept, he returned home. When he returned home, Bernice, Xiaoya, Daliana, Marian and Azalina were already up. Xiaoya had also prepared breakfast. Everyone gathered around the table and started eating. When did it snow last night? It actually snowed so heavily. While eating Xiaoya's wontons, Bernice asked with some doubts. She didn't notice that it was snowing outside when she went to bed last night. You just left not long ago, I don't remember. Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai recalled for a moment. He also forgot when Bernice left. He only remembered that after seeing the snow, he went upstairs to sleep. It's snowing today, do you have any activities? Looking at Jiang Hai, Bernice asked with a smile. I don't think so, just stay at home. Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai curled his lips. He had to admit that during the summer, Jiang Hai wasn't too idle. He still had some things to do. But when it came to winter he really didn't have anything to do. Last winter he played basketball and fished for the whole winter. But last year he was alone so it didn't matter. This year there were so many people around him so he couldn't play basketball and fish. Moreover, after that addiction passed he didn't like these two hobbies so much. If you ask him now what he is going to do in winter, he is a little confused because he doesn't know what he is going to do. If you have nothing to do today, let's go make tanghulu. Seeing that Jiang Hai had nothing to do, Bernice thought for a moment and suddenly said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her proposal, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, then touched his chin. This is also okay. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai felt that making tanghulu was not bad. Tanghulu is a traditional snack of Wuxia. It is available all over the country. He believes that people in Wuxia are not unfamiliar with this snack. The method is also very simple. Use a bamboo stick to skewer the fruit you want to eat. The most common one is mountain dregs. Of course, there are many different kinds now, such as grapes, kiwi, peaches, apples, oranges, grass and so on. There are all kinds of fruits. Then use the boiled sugar to cook it and then cool it down. It is very delicious. However, in terms of cooling, one thing was very important and that was to freeze it. The taste of frozen candied haws was very different from that of unfrozen ones. But if you put these candied haws in the cold storage or the refrigerator, the effect wouldn't be very good. The best effect was to use the weather to freeze it. Then the taste would be quite good. In fact, Bernice said that she wanted to eat this thing in the autumn. This was because Jiang Hai had a lot of fruit trees. Autumn was the time to harvest them. Looking at those fruits she was a little greedy. But at that time the weather wasn't cold enough so Jiang Hai didn't do it. Now that the weather was cold it was possible to do it. Great, then let's eat together. Hearing that Jiang Hai agreed to make it, Bernice couldn't help but smile. Then she said to the girls next to her. Hearing Bernice's words, Xiaoya was very excited because she has eaten it before. But Delina and Marian looked at each other. They really haven't eaten this thing before. But seeing Bernice and Xiaoya's excited appearance, they were also very interested. Only Azalina shrugged her shoulders. She had eaten this thing before but she didn't think that it was delicious. But since everyone wanted to make it, she was no exception. Since everyone agreed to do this, everyone's eating speed increased a lot. After eating, Jiang Hai and Bernice went to the warehouse where the fruits were stored to see what they were going to do with it. Jiang Hai liked to eat fruits and because of the spiritual qi here, the fruits were growing quite well. Although he didn't intend to sell fruits he planted a lot of them at home. Hawthorns, blue plums, kiwis, nectarines, cherries, and so on. He had everything. Looking at these fruits, Bernice's appetite was aroused. After looking around, Jiang Hai picked up a lot of things to eat. Then he carried them back to the villa. After bringing the fruits back, they began to prepare. Removing the seeds and peeling, these things didn't need Jiang Hai's help as Bernice already knew. But there was a problem, they didn't have any bamboo sticks or rock candy. This gave the girls a headache. I'll go to the town. But Jiang Hai didn't care. Then he decided to go to the town and see if he could buy it. He knew that he could buy bamboo sticks. This was because in the United States some people like to eat barbecued meat with bamboo sticks. It was said that people from the Middle East and Wuxia spread the news. During the last barbecue party, Jiang Hai ate a lot of barbecued meat with bamboo sticks. So he could definitely buy bamboo sticks. But for rock candy he would have to try his luck. Americans like to eat sugar, granulated sugar, soft sugar, caramel sugar, maple sugar. They like to eat all kinds of sugar. But Jiang Hai wasn't sure if there was any rock sugar in the United States. So after talking to everyone, Jiang Hai drove to the town. When his car drove out of the manor he saw a cleaning truck on the road of the town. After giving way to the snow removal truck, Jiang Hai drove into the town. But as soon as he entered, he found that the town was very busy. At this time, everyone was cleaning up the snow from yesterday. It seems that except for the time when the town was being renovated, there wasn't such a busy time. When they saw Jiang Hai again, they didn't know if it was because Jiang Hai had participated in the two parties and went to watch the town's football team play. This time, when Jiang Hai came to the town, at least the young people were more friendly to Jiang Hai. Some people began to take the initiative to greet Jiang Hai. This was a good start. After parking the car in the parking lot, Jiang Hai tightened his clothes and went to a supermarket on the business street. Supermarket was the abbreviation for supermarket, but in fact this was not a supermarket. It was more like a convenience store. But even so, the daily sales here weren't low. Even if it was winter in Winthrop, there were still some people who came here to play. At least in this shop there were more than a dozen people buying things. Many of them were Wuxia people. In addition to buying some daily necessities, many Wuxia people would also take some cigarettes here when they left. This was a habit of the Chinese people. Although Jiang Hai did not smoke, he had some understanding of the cigarettes in the United States. When it came to cigarettes in the United States, 9 out of 10 people would think of Marlboro. But in fact, Marlboro was a Swiss brand and had nothing to do with the United States. But the sales in the United States were the highest. In the United States, the most popular cigarette brand was Camel, followed by Winston, Good Fortune, and another brand called American Spirit. There was a picture of a smoking Native American on the outside of the cigarette box. It was said that this type of cigarette did not contain any essence and was made from pure tobacco leaves. It was very popular in the United States, but it was also very strong. Other than American Spirit, the best-selling cigarette was White Marlboro. At this time, the Wuxia tourists in the shop were all picking cigarettes. Each person could only bring 2 cigarettes back to China, so there were not many choices. This shop was Jiang Hai's shop. He rented it, so when Jiang Hai walked in he was stopped by the shop manager. "Hi Jiang, you're here. What do you want to buy?" Seeing Jiang Hai walk in, the shop manager, a bearded man, said with a smile. His current life was closely related to Jiang Hai. Moreover, he also heard that Jiang Hai wanted to integrate into this place. Therefore, he would not be stingy to show his goodwill. "Oh, hello, you are Luo Lin." Seeing the bearded shop manager come over to greet him, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment. After thinking for a long time, he did not call out this person's name. Indeed, he was not familiar with the people in Winthrop. "Luo Lin Canal. It's good that you remember my name. Ah, is there anything you want to buy?" Hearing that Jiang Hai still remembered that his name was Luo Lin, the big bearded man was very happy. He asked Jiang Hai with a happy face, "You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."